Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Season 5 of the Apex Online Racing Endurance League on the PC platform. We are kicking off this season with our very first round today, and we will be going through the season racing every other week. So we do get break weeks in between each of the races that we are going to be doing here. But after a very eventful Season 4, we are coming back with Season 5. My name is Yorkie065, and I have hopped from the racing seat that I was in the previous season, and instead I am going to be commentating and obviously providing you guys the coverage for the entirety of this season. Last season it was Mr. King Kodiak, but as he has various other commitments during the week, the commentary booth became available, so I decided to come in and steal this rather nice fancy chair that I am sat in, and obviously provide you guys with the coverage. So, as you could probably tell, the first round that we are going to be racing here is going to be from the Daytona Road Course. And yeah, although obviously we're going to be racing at the Daytona circuit, it's not going to be just the ovals, the road course, as you can see, and we're doing a 2.4 hour race that we are going to be doing this evening. It's going to be 2 hours and 25 minutes in total, and as you can see, round 2 in 2 weeks time we shall be racing at the Red Bull Ring, and after that on the 30th of May we're going to be at Circuit of the Americas, and both the Red Bull Ring GP race and also that race at COTA will both be 2 hours in length. Then the 13th of June we'll be racing at Spa-Francorchamps, where we'll be doing a 2.4 hour race. Imola is being run on the 27th of June, should be a 2 hour race, and then 2.4 hours for the finale at Circuit de la Sarve, for a replication of the Le Mans 24 hours on the 11th of July, as you can see. So a couple of tracks there we have used in the past. We've used the Daytona Road Course. Pretty sure we've used Spa-Francorchamps at some point, and of course we've used Le Mans. I know that last season, prior to the actual race, or should I say the season actually kicking off, we did a race at Circuit of the Americas. But the Red Bull Ring and also Imola are two new tracks, which I believe we are going to be using at the endurance calendar. The Red Bull Ring should be a pretty good one, as obviously the long straights will facilitate overtaking quite a lot, but Imola is going to be a very interesting track, as it's a lot tighter and a lot twistier, and obviously with the multi-class racing element, the traffic is going to be much more prominent in that race, and managing the traffic is going to be extra important. So that'll be an interesting round when we actually come to that on the 27th of June. I believe we are just going to be launching into the lobby reasonably soon. But there have been a couple of changes between Season 4 and Season 5. In the previous season, we ran 3 classes of the LMP1H, the LMP1 2016 cars, which were part of the Spirit of Le Mans DLC. Of course, we ran the LMP2 cars and then also GTE as well. However, for Season 5, we have dropped the LMP2 cars and instead are going to be racing with just the LMP1 2016 cars and also the GTEs. Unfortunately, the participation levels in LMP2 dropped off quite heavily towards the end, and the LMP1 2016 cars are quite interesting in their dynamic with the hybrid usage and the hybrid boost. The cars are reasonably well balanced, although there does seem to be some favouring leaning towards the Audi R18. We'll cover those over the course of this race, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that class pans out. And of course we've got the GTE cars as well. There'll be plenty of drivers, a number of names that you'll be hopefully familiar with if you have tuned into AOR broadcasts previously. There'll be a number of names that you recognise from there, and obviously we've got a decent mix of Corvettes, Fords, I believe there is also, yep, some Porsches, maybe some Ferraris somewhere in the mix. I do see an Aston Martin. I don't quite see a Ferrari in the list, but it'll be a good mix of cars that we have in the GTE field. So hopefully we'll have some very interesting dynamic racing. We are just about launching into the lobby now, so we shall be getting underway with this race coverage. Of course, we have ourselves a qualifying session prior to the beginning of this race. I believe the qualifying session is about 15 minutes in length. I shall be able to 100% confirm for you once we actually get loaded into the session in just a short moment's time. But yeah, obviously the drivers will be out on track at the same time, both classes. So the squabble for track position is going to be key in order to get a good lap in, because obviously the LMP cars, or the LMP1s, are going to be much, much quicker around the lap than the GTE cars. We're expecting a pole time to be roughly in around the 127.6 mark, or the mid 127s. Should be the pole time for the LMP1, and then I believe the GTE cars were kind of up in the 140s. So there's a good 15 to 20 odd seconds difference between the two. But here we go then with our actual qualifying session. As you can see at the top of the screen, there is going to be 15 minutes is the length of the session. So here is our lobby host, the coordinator of the league, the main man who is running the show, Andrex. And as you can see, he is driving the Audi R18 LMP1 car. We shall have a look at all the various different drivers in this league and go through their cars that they're actually driving. So Colonel McCoy, see at the top of the list there, he's also in the Audi R18, and in this league the drivers get to use both versions of the Audi, both the Le Mans version, which is the low downforce package, and then also the Fuji version, which is the high downforce package, as well as the wing angles for the cars are split between the two. And obviously there's only one version of the Toyota and one version of the Porsche. And then got Zion, who's there driving in the Corvette C7R. We've got Royalty, who's going out in the Ford, just coming out of the pit lane, as you can see there. Smolder is driving in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage GTE car. Logan, who is also one of the other league coordinators, you can see he's driving the Toyota TSO 50 LMP1 car. We then got Speedy Go, who's driving the Ford GT for the GTE class. We got Atlas, who's just coming out the pit lane, also in the Ford GT as well. We got Cleanstein, who's there driving in the Audi R18. You'll probably see quite a few Audi R18s in this league. We've got Marauder though. He's going to be driving the Porsche 919 hybrid. So there is a bit of variety in the LMP field, and we have got at least one of the three LMPs available for choice. Scott is driving the Corvette, as you can see. Inky Chris, new driver, who I do not recognise, he's driving the Porsche 919 hybrid as well. We then got Empower, who ran in the previous endurance season in the GTE class, driving the Corvette. He also raced in the IMSA Lights Endurance Series as well, and of course he was also part of the GT3 League, so seen him plenty of times out on circuit. Spudbuster is driving the Toyota. Colin is out driving the Corvette, as we can see, in the McCool Sunshades livery there. Very nice one. We got Back Graybilson, who is driving the Porsche 911 RSR. Then got GTR Bo, who's driving the Ford GT. Bazanchek as well, he's also out driving the Ford GT. And Minisco is there out in the Corvette GT car as well. Dowking is also out in the Corvette too. So Corvette seeming to be pretty popular in the GT class. Yarmo, a fan favourite. You can see there him going through the picture in the Audi R18 driving the LMP1 car. Mr. Van Orman out on track, also in the Corvette there. And then got Lama, who's out in the Audi R18. Then got Mali Bacco, who is driving a Ferrari. We do have a Ferrari on the grid, a 488 GTE car, so it's good to see that. A little bit of variety in the GTE field. Dakuza driving the Corvette, as we can see there. Flaming Parrot, returning from Season 4, who was... Well, actually, no, he was in the IMSA Lights series, sorry, and he was in the LMP3 class. He's now taken to the GTE cars. And I believe there was one other driver as well, Zenvo. I believe he is one that we have missed. He is driving that Audi IR18, and we can see the times already at 125.6. Already smashed the previous record from last season. I do believe the qualifying conditions are different though, because we started last season's qualifying in the dark, so lap time's a little bit different there, possibly a little bit more grip with the track temperatures being up a little bit higher, but at the moment Lama is the best part of 3 seconds off of Zenvo's pole time. If we look to the GTE cars, Dowking has currently got provisional pole with a 140.1, and then 2 seconds off the back of him is Dakuza. Actually make that 1.5 seconds, sorry, off the back of him. Dakuza's just gone and popped a lap time in there. It was Smolder who was previously holding second in that Aston Martin GTE. So it seems like the majority of drivers are out on circuit at the moment, circulating around the track. There are one, maybe two drivers that I have missed. I do believe we're meant to be running with a full 30-man grid. Here's one of the drivers that we haven't picked up previously. It's Coxon. He is driving the Audi R18, as you can see. So the Audi R18 proven to be very popular in the LMP1 field. Has some natural advantages over the other two, the Toyota and the Porsche, over the course of a single flying lap, over the course of a full race, especially a race that is 2.4 hours in length that we are going to be running with here today. It does give the opportunity for the Toyota and also the Porsche to actually come into play as well, and if you can get a decent setup on those two cars, you can hold a bit of a candle to the Audi drivers as well. But at the moment, Zenvo looking quite comfortable with that provisional pole time, just chilling out in the pit lane, as is Lama, but he's now actually going back out onto the circuit. So let's see if we can actually pick up a driver somewhere along the line near the beginning of a lap. And Andrex is actually coming down towards the bus stop chicane. Obviously we saw Lama just going out onto the circuit as well. Yarmo currently P3 at the moment. He's now just leaving out onto the circuit. Inky Chris has just gone out onto the banking. Has now actually jumped back to the pits as well. Kind of McCoy there. So I believe Andrex is probably going to be a man that we are going to use for a qualifying lap of this Daytona International Raceway road course. So coming into turn one, we've got a GTE car here in front of us. Quite difficult braking zone, trying to get the car slowed down into second gear, hook up the apex on the inside, and then with these LMP1 cars, I'll be using the hybrid boost coming out through turn 2 and now into turn 3, the International Horseshoe. Looking okay there, but a little bit of oversteer on the exit before coming into the kink. Then we're coming into turn 5, the Western Horseshoe, shifting down into second gear. Bring up the speedo there, and obviously using the hybrid boost coming off of the corner, but you'll want to save some before actually coming off of this turn 6 and out onto the banking into the high speed section. So obviously putting down the power will be draining the battery, accelerating the car up to a higher top speed. Do have a GTE here in front of us as well. That actually looks like an M6 GTE as well. I'm not entirely sure who that is, but he's... Oh, Andrex is going to get caught up behind. Although I think that may have been a new driver actually just joining the session, which allowed Andrex to ghost through. So Andrex would have been marginally affected by that car in front of him. Obviously it would have made it a little bit difficult for him to spot his braking point and apex, but it wouldn't have hindered him in terms of being able to carry the speed through the turn. So decent run off of the bus stop coming across the line, but I don't think he improved on his lap time. So let's see if we can pick up Lama. He's currently holding second. at the moment in class. See how he does, as I believe he's just coming up towards the bus stop chicane. So what we'll be looking for is the Rolex signing on the right hand side on the barrier. Shifting down the gears, probably drop it into third. It does stay in fourth, interestingly. You can use third gear going through that bus stop chicane. Ideally you want to try and hook up all the curbs. Flicking the car up into sixth gear, and where this is a diesel engine car, it doesn't rev all that high. And it uses slightly less fuel per lap than the Toyota and the Porsche. However, the fuel tank of the Audi is quite considerably smaller, so the volume of fuel that they are able to carry on board for an entire stint is obviously going to be less than what the Toyota and the Porsche can do. And despite the Toyota and Porsche using a little bit more fuel per lap, they are able to go further into a stint. So you see Zenvo, let's jump on board with him. He's catching the curve all slightly awkwardly there, going through turn 2. Taking a slightly tighter line, coming into turn 3. It's quite nice and wide on the exit, but it seems like he's bailed out of this lap. Instead, he's just recharging his hybrid energy a little bit there. As the hybrid regeneration is done under braking. However, if the drivers do lock up their wheels under braking, they will get no hybrid regen from that. So they need to make sure that they are braking just the right amount, the right threshold, to obviously get the maximum braking performance, but also get the maximum amount of hybrid regen as well, ready for coming out the exit of the corner. And using that hybrid, as it is a manual deployment, is going to be key to getting good lap times here around Daytona, as it's very easy to get overzealous with the hybrid and end up using too much, which could cost you somewhere along the line around the lap. So just we're right on board with Zenvo then, as he's coming out of the final turn. We'll do a lap with him, see how he does. So dumping the hybrid boost, hitting 356 kilometers an hour before braking hard down into second gear for turn 1, hooking up the apex very nicely, getting hard on the accelerator, dumping a load of the hybrid, coming through turn 2. Nice line coming into turn 3, hooking up that apex once again, letting the car run out wide on the exit there. Use the full width of the track. You can go beyond that white line on the exit there. The Corvette getting quite nicely out of Zenvo's way. Before again hard on the brakes, getting the car slowed down for the Western Horseshoe. Deploying the hybrid out the exit of that to get the car back up to speed before getting the car slowed down again for turn 6. Now we'll dump whatever hybrid boost that he actually has to get as much acceleration done as possible using that hybrid. Now he gets a short moment to chill out and spot his braking point for the bus stop. Chuck the car in, hook up the curbs. That was a little bit deep there, so that's going to invalidate his lap time, but if you get a decent run off of that, obviously you just power on through the final banking turn and on towards the actual start-finish line. So let's jump back to the GTE field. M-Power is currently holding pole at the moment. He's got a 2-tenth difference between himself and Dowking in the lap times. There is Dowking in that blue Corvette, just going through the middle of the shot there. Mr. Van Orman is currently in third, so Corvettes seem to be very, very strong around this circuit. It is a power circuit, so the cars that are going to be quick in a straight line are going to serve a lot better around this track in comparison to, say, the Ford, which is a bit more of a better balanced car. It's kind of a bit of a jack of all trades, but isn't really superior at anything. So the Ford may be better for circuits such as Kota, Spa and Imola, but here at Daytona and probably also the Red Bull Ring, the Corvettes are going to be very strong. And also be pretty strong around Le Mans as well. Here you can see Scott in the fourth Corvette is also there at the front. Bo is the first non-Corvette that we have currently in 5th place in the GTE class. And then we got Becca Grabelson there in 6th place in class in that Porsche 911 RSR. Dakuza just chilling out in the lower part of the banking at the moment. Smolder in the Aston Martin. The Aston Martin's another power car as well. Fares pretty well on a circuit like this, however it probably isn't quite as well refined as the Corvette in the corners. So it does have some slight weakness and a bit of a disadvantage there. We've got Yarmo in the pit lane, currently 3rd in the LMP1 class. He's just coming out of the pits even though there's less than a minute remaining. Actually no, sorry, he's coming into his pits, so he won't be participating any longer in this session. Colonel McCoy, however, he is out on the banking, coming into, well, out of the final turn, essentially. And is on the run to the start-finish line. So let's see if he will improve his lap time. I don't think he did, so I think he may be just going for one final lap attempt. In an okay run through turn 1. It is okay to run a little bit deep there and be just off the apex, but obviously you don't want to be that deep through turn 3, so Colonel McCoy not having the best of times. Andrex has got himself up into 5th place in the LMP1 class. It's actually just behind Colonel McCoy on track as well. And Inky Chris is there in the pit lane, so he'll be starting from no better than 6th position. Coxon will be starting in no better than 7th place. Marauder will be no better than 8th. Logan's out on track in the Toyota. He is just coming through one of the 2 horseshoes. And that is the International Horseshoe turn 3. We've got Kleinstein. He's out on track, I believe. He is coming towards the bus stop chicane. So we'll stick with him for the moment to see if he will improve on his lap time. He's currently 10th in class in the LMP1s. So he'll be looking to try and move himself up and gain some positions. We've got Spudbuster behind him. He's currently last in the LMP1 class, and has also got himself a grid penalty as well, which would have been for speeding in the pit lane. So here comes Kleinstein on the run to the start-finish line. Does he improve? He does by a 1/10 of a second, but it isn't enough to gain him any positions. Zenvo has completed his qualifying session. Andrex looks like he has completed his as well. Colonel McCoy is there in the pit lane. So Logan is one of the last runners out on the circuit. So is also Atlas Guerin. And he's also got Colin there in front of him. Actually, all 3 of them are going to come across the line in reasonably close proximity to each other. Colin's going to be the first across the line here. Does he improve? He does, and puts himself up into 28th place. Didn't see where the other 2 improved, but here are your official classification results then. So Zenvol getting pole position, Lama in 2nd, Yarmo in 3rd, Andrex getting himself up into 4th, ahead of Colonel McCoy in 5th. Inky Chris qualified 6th place, with Coxon 7th, Marauder in 8th. Logan was in 9th place, Kleinstein in 10th, and then Spudbuster had actually had 2 grid place penalties, but of course he's starting from the back of the LMP1 field anyway, so that's not going to affect him. Empower starting in 1st for the GTE class. Dowking is there in 2nd, Mr. Van Orman in 3rd, Dakuza 4th, Scott was in 5th. 6th position goes to Bo. Back Gabrielson is there in 7th, Smolder in 8th, 9th goes to Speedy.go. Chloe is the driver in the M6 GTE car. They'll be starting in 10th place, Minisco in 11th, Brzanczek in 12th, and I didn't quite catch the remaining drivers, so Zion in 13th, Mali Bako in 14th position, Atlas Guerin in 15th, Flaming Parrot in 16th, Colin we saw get himself up into 17th in class, 28th overall, and then Royalty will be starting from the back of the grid. So, we are just moments away from getting the first round fully underway. We are going to be doing one manual in-game formation lap. So the drivers will have 2 minutes during this little period just to prep themselves, double check that they've got their pit strategies all set up, ready for the race. They're on the right setup for the race and everything is looking good make sure they get themselves comfortable, because it is 2 hours and 25 minutes that these drivers will be racing for here in this opening round. And as I said, we'll be doing one in-game formation lap, which will be under manual control. So the drivers will drive round, try and maintain the heat in their tyres and also in their brakes. And then at the end of that formation lap, at the green light, we will be going racing and getting this opening round of Season 5 underway. So we've got about 15 odd seconds left for the drivers to ready up. I imagine Andrax, the lead coordinator, will probably just be giving the final checks and run through, explaining the final details of the formation lap to all the other drivers, so they're all comfortable. And here we go then. Cars start rolling. That clock at the top of the screen will not start counting down until the leader actually crosses the start finish line, or the lights actually go green, is when that timer will begin. So drivers are slowly rolling. They'll be rolling in single file formation for the moment. As you can see, quite a lot of Audi R18s here at the front of the field. Like I said, they've got a natural advantage, and that is because their standard engine, the power plant, produces 520 horsepower, I believe, or it's 20 horsepower more than what the Toyota and the Porsche produce. So even off of the hybrid, the Audi has a little bit more power to just push it down the straights. The aero models of the cars are very, very similar, so there isn't too much of a difference there. But like I said, they do come with a smaller fuel tank in order to offset that power advantage that they have. So over the course of the lap, they do have a basically a pace advantage, but over the course of an entire race, it does even and balance themselves out a little bit more. So let's look to the front of the GTE field as they're all filtering their way through. You see Dowking and Mr. Van Orman at the moment currently have penalties. What are the size of their penalties? Both 5 seconds, so I believe that may have been potentially contact with other drivers. There you can see M-Power doesn't actually have a rear wing on our screen, so that's an interesting looking Corvette. But yeah, those 2 penalties will be removed from their total race results. We see Spudbuster was lagging a little bit. He's putting himself back into formation, and it'll be when we come out of the this bus stop chicane is when the drivers will form up into their 2x2 formation, and then we will be going racing on the green light. I see a little bit of a traffic jam there at the back of the field. As we can see, a number of drivers slowing down a little bit. I think that was to try and allow Spudbuster to get back into the correct position at the rear of the LMP1 field, which I believe he is in. So now the drivers should be forming up in their 2x2 formation. Zenvo, the pole man, will have the inside line to turn 1, so he will stay down low in the banking to drivers left. And it should be reasonably soon that the drivers are getting into a formation that we have lost 1 driver already. Unfortunately, I see we're down to 29 drivers in total rather than 28 drivers rather than 29. Still got the 11 LMP1 cars, so it is one of the GTEs that went, and it looks like we may actually be doing another AOR manual formation lap. The drivers haven't formed up in their 2x2 formation, and I'm guessing, yeah, with a couple of drivers having some contact earlier on at the beginning of the formation lap, they've been allowed to go into the pit lane to get that damage repaired and then get back out onto track and into position. So we're seeing Dowking currently in the pit lane. We also have Mr. Van Orman in the pit lane as well. M-Power as well, he's now got a rear wing again on the rear of his Corvette, so it's good to see. And Atlas Garin was also another driver who seemed to pick up some damage. So those drivers will go into the pit lane. I do believe they can form up back in their starting positions that they actually qualified in. Should double check with that as Empower is coming out of the pit lane. As you can see, drivers are still moving around the circuit, which is good. Yeah, Empower accelerating out to allow him to get back out to the front of the field, but obviously he needs to be careful with these GTE cars out on the circuit here as well. So we just need a little bit of communication between the drivers to allow him to get back into the position there. A couple of the drivers doing a little bit of weaving and Empower having to dodge round. There you go, the LMP1 field taking it nice, slow and steady as well, allowing the drivers to get back into their position. So Empower's back where he needed to be. Kuza's also back up there. Mr. Van Orman is slowly picking his way through the field. He's also got Dowking there behind him as well. So they'll be forming back up into their original starting positions. You can see there's a little bit of damage still on the front of Mr. Van Orman's car, but he won't actually have that. That won't actually be impacting his racing performance. So Mr. Van Orman should form a third place and Dowking in second. And then the only other driver was Atlas Guerin, who came into the pit lane, but he's formed back up at the rear of the field. So I believe the LMP1 cars will probably pick up their pace once again, continue on their usual formation lap. We can see Zenvo though is doing a little bit of braking there as well, just trying to keep and maintain some of the heat in the brakes and in the tyres. And thank you very much, Aid the Ace. As yes, my YouTube channel did hit 25k subs today, just a couple of hours ago. Obviously a very proud moment. Thank you very much to everyone for supporting me on the channel there. Obviously, if you enjoying the content that AOR are putting up on their channel here, and if you don't want to miss out any future rounds of the Apex Online Racing Endurance League with Season 5, make sure you subscribe and hit that red button just underneath the video here to actually pull up alongside Zenvo, as Zenvo has slowed and brought the field down to roughly around a correct pace, but Llama's there positioning his car to try and keep an eye on Zenvo so he can see when he actually use of the hybrid as well to get going. So here we go then. Is any time between now and that start finish line that Zenvo can get the racing underway. There's a little bit of a field spread between the LMP1s and the GTEs. Everyone formed up in the nice 2x2 formation, and now we are racing. Now we are underway with Season 5 of the AOR Endurance League. Zenvo getting a dream start. Llama holding second. Yamo in third. We'll hope that everyone gets through turn 1 and the subsequent turns cleanly without any issue. Here comes the GTE field. Things seem to be pretty calm here, although there's a little bit of side-by-side action between Scott and also Dakuza in the background there, as we can see. Ford GT of Bo with what looks like quite a bit of damage to his car, but that's probably not actually representative of what he is actually experiencing. So far so good from all the drivers throughout the entirety of the field, but Zenvo at the moment getting a 1 second lead to Yamo. Yamo's managed to get himself up into second place ahead of Llama in this opening lap. So just over a second between first and second. Zenvo getting that early knee, trying to stretch his legs, get away from his competitors, as picking up the slipstream is going to be important here at this circuit. Fuel saving is very key to the strategy, especially of the Toyotas and the Porsches, and if they want to compete with the speed of the Audi R18. There you can actually see the difference between Llama and Yamo. Andrex is about a second off the back. Colonel McCoy has lost the position to Inky Chris, but he's actually gaining on Inky Chris and is going to sail past him before they get to the end of the first racing lap. So it'll be interesting to see actually how the Porsches actually fare in comparison to the Audis. I know that the Toyota can keep up with the Audis, but I haven't seen the Porsches actually do so as of yet. And Inky Chris regains that 5th position after Colonel McCoy ran a little bit deep in turn 1. He ran a little bit deep there in turn 3 as well. That's another mistake, and mistakes in these LMP1 cars are quite costly. Yes, you do have that hybrid to try and power you out of a corner again, but still you do end up losing time from being meters away from the apex, so you've got to make sure that you hit your marks. Obviously it's quite difficult to do because the visibility from the cockpits of those LMP1 cars isn't great, and you're also travelling at quite high speeds as well. Coming up to the front of the GTE field, we've got a 5-car Corvette train being led by Empower at the moment. Dowking is there in second, very, very close. Mr. Van Orman is not too far off the back, but he's got Scott less than 0.2 of a second behind. And you can see the 5 Corvettes going through the picture, and then Bo in the Ford GT going through as well. So 5-6 car train here at the head of the GTE field, and there's going to be a bit of a gap between Bo and Back Gabrielson. As you can see, just under 4 seconds at the moment, and there's about 3.5 seconds to Chloe in the M6, and then there's a load of cars behind the M6 driver. And actually see that Smolder is there going up over the high line and going past the M6. The Aston Martin got a fair bit more straight line speed, and there you can see Corvette and a Ferrari and a number of other GTE cars coming through the picture in the background as well. So, oh, that's a Ferrari spinning in the background. That is Malay Bacco. He's managed to keep it out of the walls, and he's managed to rejoin the track quite safely without hindering or threatening anyone else. So we'll get away with that. But obviously that would have put some unnecessary heat through the tyres, probably taken a little bit of life out of them as well. But the bus stop chicane is pretty tricky when following in close proximity to the cars in front of you. Obviously you lose quite a bit of downforce, and it's quite a downforce dependent set of corners, as it is medium to high speed. Be in third gear for these GTE cars. As you see Scott all over the back of Mr. Van Orman. He's right up there, less than a car length between the two of them. Will he go to have a look coming into the Western Horseshoe? He's not. Dowking though, getting very, very close to the back. No, sorry, that was Empower getting very close to the back of Dowking. Dowking's managed to get himself up into the lead of the GTE class. You can see that Mr. Van Orman as well. He's got a slightly better run coming off of turn 6 than Empower there in second place. That lead yellow Corvette. Dowking is the leading Corvette in the blue one at the front of this train. Scott was looking very, very close to the back of Mr. Van Orman, previously going into the Western Horseshoe. We can see that also D'Couza and Bo have dropped off the back of the front of this GTE field as well. So it's turned into a bit more of a 4-car train at the head of the GTE class. Jumping back up to Yarmo. Yarmo is actually now making his way through some of the GTE traffic. Still in second position, but he's now 5 seconds off of the leader, Zenvo. Zenvo is putting in some extraordinary pace, as we can see, 27.5. It's a good 0.7 of a second quicker than last season's fastest lap, which was a 28.2. That was set by Worn Tyre in the Toyota. There were a couple of Audis which unfortunately didn't make it to the end of the lap, so the end of the race, so we didn't actually get to see what their fastest lap times were. They may have been faster, but the official recorded fastest race lap time of the 28.2 has now just been absolutely blown out of the water by Zenvo. There he is on screen, just coming through turn 1. Very nice, neat and tidy. Seems like they have gone through a couple of the GTE cars already. I believe it was Chloe that we saw was being passed, which also means that Speedy Go has also been lapped by the GTE drivers, the LMP1 drivers. It's Mali Bacco that we can see here, getting very, very sideways once again. Coming through that was the Western Horseshoe, and that was actually Zenvo, I believe, going through the picture there. Yep, there he is. So already we're into the multi-class traffic situation, and obviously that is going to be key, as the GTE drivers, or the slower class drivers, are instructed to stay on the racing line, and the LMP1 cars have to time it right and go around them. You see Zenvo taking so much speed coming into the bus stop chicane, but there was a Ford GT there off the circuit. You can just see the speed difference between the LMP1 cars and the GTEs as Zenvo just scrapes the wall at the top of the banking there. I think he'll get away with it, but some of the GTE drivers do need to stick to their lines a little bit more, because it looked like a couple of them were presenting the inside line to Zenvo. Zenvo half going for it. Go down the inside of this GTE. And this is one of the things that you'll tend to find with the multi-class racing, and you get very, very close. There's some pretty hair-raising and butt-clenching moments in the lap traffic, and obviously with there being a number of new drivers to the new to the series, it'll take probably this race and maybe a little bit of the next one just to kind of get used to each other and kind of get the confidence to actually stick on the racing line with the slower class cars and make the faster class cars that are doing the lapping actually go around them. So there is quite a bit of trust that is needed between the drivers, but there you can see a beautiful example of how to do it correctly. So let's actually go to some battles in the LMP1 field. We've got Marauder chasing down Coxon. Less than a second between the two, and then Llama is actually having a nightmare over the time. He's now down in 8th position. He's actually running very deep there. He's actually made contact with the wall coming out the exit of turn 6. That's going to demote him down into 10th position. It rejoins back onto the track. He may have picked up some damage from that, but it just went way too quickly into that turn 6, leading out onto the banking. As you saw, just lost the rear end of the car and went sideways into the wall. Right hand side, making contact with the tyre barriers. It's going to be pretty difficult to actually try and pick up to see if there is actually any damage on his car. We jump to the roof cam, can't really see anything there. That's the cockpit view that the LMP1 drivers are dealing with, and as you can see, it's almost like a letterbox looking out of the Audi R18. We go into the chase cam. There may be the tiniest amount of damage on that right hand side, but it's not really going to affect him too much, and it doesn't feel, well, Llama doesn't really feel the need to go into the pit lane, so he may lose a kilometre an hour or so off of his top speed with a slightly less aerodynamically optimal car, but yeah, it won't be worth pitting with that one. We've got a battle between Coxon and Marauder. They've actually swapped positions. Marauder managing to get himself up into 6th position ahead of Coxon. I believe there was a little bit of traffic in play as well. You can see a Ferrari and also a Ford GT in the background. We've got another Ford GT coming up here in front of us as well, but Coxon will be going high up the banking, up around the outside of him. Actually no, the GT stayed up high. He's now actually closing right up onto the back of Marauder. Jump on board with him. He's not actually going to go for that pass though. He has lifted out and decided to stay behind either that or Marauder was saving just a tiny little bit of the hybrid boost as he gets right up underneath the rear wing of that Corvette there in front of him. He's going to pass him at some point. There he goes. Up underneath, forcing that Corvette up high. And this is actually also bringing the Toyota of Logan into play as well. As there you can see Coxon going up high around the outside of the Porsche driver. The Audi using a little bit more of the hybrid, but now the Porsche and also the Toyota have the slipstream of that Audi. Don't think they'll be able to threaten him coming into the braking zone for turn 1. So Coxon leads Marauder, leads Logan. Logan running a little bit deep there in the Toyota. Oh, he's got to make contact with the wall. He's got to lose the rear of the car. That's going to demote him down a couple of positions. He's got to wait for some of the traffic as well. He's going to have pretty substantial front end damage as he goes to make contact with the wall once again as well. In his haste trying to rejoin onto the circuit. That's him now down into 10th position, and he is going to have quite a bit of damage to the front of that Toyota, I am almost certain. It wouldn't surprise me if we see him pit at the end of this lap to get that damage repaired, and his teammate Spudbuster is coming up there behind him. Following in the dirty air of another LMP car, it does cost you an awful lot of downforce, and if you don't account for that in the car setup, i.e. making it a little bit more understeery with a little bit more ring and utilising the rear diffuser as it gets caught up underneath a Ford GT there at the apex of turn 6. Gets away without making any contact though. But yeah, unless you utilise that rear wing and utilise the rear diffuser on that car, you will see you getting quite a lot of oversteer when following in the dirty air of another driver, and you can see that Logan doesn't quite have the speed that he needs coming down the back straight towards the bus stop chicane. He swapped positions with his teammate Spudbuster, who goes very, very deep there in the bus stop chicane, but manages to hold on to it without too much drama. So let's come back to the front of the GTE field. As we got Dow King still leading Empower, but Empower's gone a little bit deep there. Scott is there in third place, Mr. Van Orman in fourth position. So those two drivers are swapped round off camera. Not too far behind them is Dakuza, and also Bo is a little bit further down the field as well. Just seeing Empower coming out of turn 6 onto the banking there. You can see Dow King in front and Scott also in the picture. Very nice shots as we are obviously here into the night. Got the LMP1 car, the Audi coming through, may just be able to get Dow King before the bus stop chicane. It does. I think that may be Zenvo, but Zenvo's gone a little bit deep. Oh no, Empower's gone and lost the rear of the car in the braking zone. That's going to pop him down into fourth position. He's gone and lost the position to Mr. Van Orman and also Scott. Empower making quite a substantial mistake there under braking, coming into the bus stop chicane. That was very, very costly for him. Fortunately, he didn't seem to make contact with anything other than a trackside sign, I believe it was, that he actually hit. I'm not entirely sure what that was. It may have actually been a rear spoiler of something. I'm not entirely sure. It was! Dow King's gone and lost his rear spoiler on his car. He's immediately having to pit because that's going to cost him quite a lot of rear downforce. That looked a little bit slow going into the pit entry. He was obviously trying to find the pit speed limiter and actually get that engaged properly before coming into the pits. But yeah, it was Dow King's. So Dow King from the lead. He lost the rear spoiler somehow coming into the bus stop chicane, potentially scraping the wall right upon entry, which then probably would have put Empower off a little bit and distracted him and caused him to run deep into the bus stop chicane. So Dow King obviously coming into the pits to get that damage repaired. He, I imagine, would have gone with a full tank of fuel as well, judging by the fuel that the other drivers have, 65 litres, and Dow King, whereas he's there in 12th position in class now, has now got best part of 88 litres of fuel. So he's obviously gone and put more fuel in the car. Not entirely sure if he's gone and changed tyres, but obviously repairing that damage that he incurred. I can only imagine that he just scraped the wall slightly just upon the initial entry to the bus stop chicane and the braking zone, because there was nothing else and no one else around him. We just saw in the foreground of the picture there, I believe Spudbuster in the Toyota was off the track on the grass on the outside of the Western Horseshoe, but he's now back onto the circuit. The two Toyotas not having the best of races, as we are well into the night now. The track is very, very dark. It's 10 times weather time acceleration that we have here for this opening round, so we will be doing a full 24-hour in-game day and night cycle in the 2.4 hours of racing that we are doing here for this opening round. But yeah, Spudbuster and Logan not having the best of times. Yamo's still there in second. Zenvo's still leading. He's now got a lead of 12 seconds to second place man. Andrex has now got himself up into third place. He's got a gap of around 5 seconds to Yamo in front of him, and then a good 8 to 9 seconds to Colonel McCoy behind. Inky Chris is there in fifth place in the first non-Audi LMP1 car. He's got quite a lot of damage to the front of his car. He doesn't have any headlights for me. I'm not entirely sure if that's actually representative of what he is experiencing, judging by the way he's just gone through the bus stop chicane. I don't quite think that's the case. That looked like a very downforce heavy front end. Probably a little bit too much as he hopped across the inside of the curbs, and that would have been a slowdown penalty for him coming out the exit of that. So we'll see if he actually goes into the pits this time round. It doesn't look like he is, so I don't think that damage is representative. He's got Cox on 3.5 seconds behind him. He'll be closing down with the slowdown penalty for Inky Chris that he will need to try and clear. Marauder is the second of the two Porsches. He's currently there, 7th position in class. And then we got Kleinstein is there in 8th place, just coming across the start-finish line. 6 seconds behind Marauder, and he's got a 3-second gap to Lama behind him. So Lama's having an absolute nightmare of a race, making a number of mistakes potentially. We saw one of them on screen when he made contact with the tyre barrier on the outside of turn 6, getting caught right up behind that Corvette GTE car there in front of him, and having a little bit of trouble as well actually getting past through the apex of turn 3, obviously with a dump of hybrid off the exit of the corner. He would have deployed, that would have allowed him to actually get past and into the clear air. But yeah, Lama starting in 2nd position, now down in 9th, having an absolute nightmare. Mr. Van Olmen is now the leader of the GTE class, with Scott half a second behind. Obviously Empower having that slight mistake with Dowking in front of him, distracting him, is there in 3rd place, and he's actually got a 4-second gap to Scott in front of him, so he's got a little bit of work cut out for him to try and close that gap back up. He saw him rejoin the track not too far behind Scott when he came back in 3rd place, but I imagine there may have been a little bit of traffic that caused that separation. Such is the ebbs and flows of the multi-class racing. Sometimes it works in your favour and allows you to close up onto an opponent. Sometimes it works against you where you get held up, as we've seen a number of drivers getting caught up behind GTE cars, and that obviously then hinders their approach and run through a turn and obviously costs them time. So D'Acusa now up into 4th place with Bo there in 5th position. There is another Ford GT in front of him, but that one will be a lap down. Smolder is not too far behind in the Aston Martin, thundering around in 6th place. And then we got Pat Gabrielson, so there in the Porsche in 7th place at the moment. Shifting down into turn 1. Is that another car that we're seeing parked on the outside there of turn 1? Who was that? I think it's Spudbuster. It is Spudbuster. He's parked somewhere there. You can see down in the bottom right hand corner of the picture, just about. Pop it into chase cam. There we go. We see he's parked kind of between the outside of turn 1 and the outside of turn 6. Not entirely sure what's going on there, if he's having a technical issue or something that he's trying to sort out, but I don't think Spudbuster will probably be going too much further into this race. So picking up Inky Chris. He's closed up onto the back of Coxon in front of him. Well, actually no, it was Coxon who got the position on Inky Chris, because it was Inky Chris who picked up that slowdown penalty coming out the exit of the bus stop chicane. So those two drivers have now swapped position. Inky Chris now on 6th, Coxon now up into 5th place. But Inky Chris will be looking to try and stick with the Audi in front of him, try and pick up some slipstream, try and get back past. You see a Corvette there getting quite nicely out of the way of these two drivers, but Inky Chris is going to have to give up the apex there just to make sure that he avoids making contact with the Corvette on his inside. Ford GT up there, up high, so quite nicely through and past him. You can see Inky Chris holding his own quite nicely in the slipstream of that Audi. He isn't really able to do anything in the approach to the bus stop chicane, so he needs to get a good run through here. Obviously be mindful of the fact that he's running in dirty. Yeah, that's a good run through the bus stop chicane, and a decent run off the exit, but now the Audi is dumping a load of its hybrid. Obviously Inky Chris will be using the hybrid of the Porsche, which isn't quite as aggressive. It's not as powerful when you're boosting it, but it lasts a little bit longer. It doesn't quite drain as quick, so it's not as powerful, but you can drain it for a little bit longer. And then one of the advantages with the hybrid on the Porsche as well, to kind of counteract that, is the fact that the Porsche regens hybrid energy both from braking at the front. It's only the front of the car, the front wheels, that deliver the hybrid power, and also regens it as well. But it also regens hybrid energy using the waste from the turbo, and it turns that to turn a little fan that recharges the battery a little bit. So even on full throttle, the 919 hybrid is regenerating some of its hybrid energy, whereas both the Toyota and the Audi only regen their hybrid under braking. And the Audi regens it and deploys it also to the front tyres only, just like the Porsche, who is right there up underneath the rear wing of that Audi coming off of the bus stop chicane. I think he had to jump on the brakes momentarily there to avoid making contact with the front of Cox, with the rear of Coxon. They're in front of Inky Chris as they're making their way through the GTE traffic. Actually seeing also, it's not Colin that we're seeing, it's not Dowking either. So I think it may have been lap traffic that we're actually seeing between the the Corvettes and that Ferrari. Dowking obviously trying to recover after his pit stop, and he's actually trying to threaten the position from Zion. He's managed to do so. He's got himself up into 8th place now, so that was actually a pass 4 position there. Dowking will be looking to hunt down the next man, which is Backer Grabelson, who is a good 16 seconds up the road. So it'll be a short while before Dowking closes up on the next competitor and is in a position to try and take 7th position. But just going back to the LMP1s, how the hybrid works. So the Audi and also the Porsche only deploy and regenerate from the front axle. Obviously the Porsche is able to regen some of its hybrid as well through that turbo waste, as I mentioned earlier. The Audi, however, is only able to do it under braking, but its hybrid deployment is actually, although shorter than the Porsche, is a little bit more powerful. And then when it comes to the Toyota, it is actually able to regen its hybrid energy from both the front and the rear axle, and also deploys to both the front and rear axle as well. And it has the most aggressive hybrid deployment of the 3 cars, but with that, it doesn't quite last as long when deploying. So you get a bigger kick and a much faster push and acceleration coming off the corner, but it won't last quite as long as an Audi. So you'll need to use it carefully. And with the actual hybrid deployment going to all 4 wheels on the Toyota, it does also mean that it can use or get on that hybrid deployment a little bit earlier than the Porsche and the Audi, because when you deploy with the Porsche and the Audi, you tend to find that you get a bit of on-power understeer coming off the exit of some of the turns. So you have to wait a little bit, get the car a little bit more straight before getting onto the hybrid, whereas the Toyota, you can still somewhat turn with some reasonable amount of balance and actually be boosting off of a corner. So they can boost a little bit earlier, a little bit harder, but obviously it doesn't quite last as long. But yeah, it's a nice balance. I generally tend to lean towards driving the Toyota. I like the way that the car feels and drives in comparison to the Audi, which is obviously favourable in terms of its 1 lap pace. And then Porsche I haven't really had too much experience with, and it seems to fare a little bit worse than the other 2 LMP1 cars from my experience. But as we're seeing one of the GTE cars having a spin there in front of Inky Chris. Did a very good job though of actually spinning it in the opposite direction to Inky Chris and avoiding jeopardising his race, because that could have been quite catastrophic for the Porsche 919 hybrid driver. Let's go back to the head of the GTE field, where Scott is within 0.4 of a second to Mr. Van Orman. As we can see in front of him, D'Couza is now 10.5 seconds off the back. M-Power has actually lost the position to D'Couza, so M-Power's made a mistake somewhere along the line. Here we can see the gap between these 2.5 tenths. We'll do a penalty update in the moment, because there's quite a number of drivers, as you can see from the leaderboard on the left hand side, who have penalties to their names. You see Empower closing up quite nicely through the bus stop chicane, providing he didn't get a slow down penalty through there. He is in a prime position for the slipstream. There goes one of the Toyota LMP1s up high around the banking. Now it's just all dependent on the actual setup that the drivers have got, but Yakuza seems to be eking away despite Empower being in the slipstream. Is Empower actually lifting and doing a little bit of fuel saving? Or is Empower running with a little bit more downforce, as we see now the R18 going around the outside of Yakuza. Yakuza go very, very deep though. He may just about be able to hold on to that. I believe that was Coxon that was going through, because it's Inky Car that is going, was there behind him, but Empower and Yakuza battling for position here. Looks like Yakuza is going to hold on to that position for now, but sorry, it's Inky Chris, not Inky Car, sorry. Inky Chris now going through and past that battle. Let's jump up to the leader and second place man, Mr. Van Orman and Scott. Scott seemed to be a little bit tighter and a little bit neater to the apex of turn 6. Give him a slightly better run coming off onto the banking here. And yep, we are, as Warlow says, just under the 2 hour mark remaining. 1 hour and 52 minutes that we have there. We've got some GTE traffic here in front of the two GTE leaders. Now when it comes to the same class traffic, normal blue flag rules apply. So in this instance, that Ford GT will have to give up the racing line to the drivers who are lapping him. And here you can see Scott closing up onto the back of Mr. Van Orman as they're picking up the slipstream, but Mr. Van Orman will get a slight tow off of that Toyota in front of him, which may help him just hold on to the lead coming into turn 1. Otherwise Scott probably could have been there to actually try and nip that position away. We've now got another LMP1 car behind. I believe that is Coxon, and then Inky Chris also saw there in the background as well. Seems that Coxon is taking his time quite nicely, trying not to interfere with this lead battle, but he will sneak through just about before the kink. That's going to put Mr. Van Orman white though, and Scott is now right there up underneath the rear wing of Mr. Van Orman. As Mr. Van Orman's gone deep. That's Coxon has actually spun on the outside of the circuit, so that's going to allow Inky Chris to retake 5th position. Scott is still there in 2nd place, letting the Porsche 919 go through, but once again he's tighter and neater to the apex of turn 6. This could give him a decent run coming up onto the banking. He's now going to have the slipstream. Mr. Van Orman is not going to get the slipstream of any cars in front of him if there's another LMP1 behind, which I don't think there is in close proximity. He could very well be under threat. Coming into the braking zone for the bus stop chicane, here comes Scott closing right up underneath the rear wing of the Corvette in front of him. But instead is just going to settle in behind, try and get that decent run coming through the bus stop chicane. It seems that Mr. Van Orman has got himself a little bit of breathing room coming off of the exit there. Coming into the final speedway banking. Scott is there lurking about 4/10 of a second behind. It doesn't really seem like there's any more traffic behind there, but I did just see a flash of an Audi R18. But yeah, he's not going to be close enough to interfere coming into turn 1. Scott is again a little bit neater to the apex coming into that first turn. I believe that this may be Coxon that's trying to get past these two drivers. It is indeed. Once again he's playing it fairly patient coming through the international horseshoe, and he'll probably once again go to try it. No, he got blocked at that time. Thought he was initially going to go for it, but Mr. Van Orman was kind of looking a little bit more defensive after the previous lap, where that almost cost him the GT class lead. Instead, it did place him in a position to prevent the LMP1 car coming through, which the GTE drivers are entitled to do. They are allowed to place their car appropriately to block one of the LMP1 cars passing going into a turn if they feel that it is unsafe for the LMP1 car to try and make an overtaking attempt in the lap traffic. in that corner, as we're seeing another spinner there off to the right hand side of the picture. Hopefully that won't interfere with the two leaders. It does not, as the driver is doing a good job to stay off the circuit and rejoin in a safe manner. So Mr. Van Orman doesn't really lose out any ground to Scott behind, but Scott is now picking up the slipstream of Mr. Van Orman there in front of him. He'll be continuing to close up as they come towards the start finish line. You can see there hitting 290, almost 295 kilometers, but Scott is breathing on the throttle, lifting off slightly. As you can see, Mr. Van Orman slightly sideways. Whoop, there goes that Ford GT, the lap car in front of him, spinning off to the outside of the circuit in turn 1. So not really going to impede these two drivers too much, but that probably would have been a little bit distracting to see that Ford GT go right rather than go left. But yeah, Scott seeming like he's pretty happy to just sit in the slipstream in the tow of Mr. Van Orman in front of him and just do some fuel saving, which is a good valid tactic for this circuit. You can see that he's got 37.5 litres of fuel, whereas Mr. Van Orman has got 35.5, so 2 whole litres that Scott has in hand over Mr. Van Orman there in front of him, and obviously that is going to allow him to run a little bit longer into the race before making his first pit stop. And I believe that the LMP1 cars will be coming in for their pit stops very soon, as we see Andrex is out currently into the pits at the moment. Yamaha has got 7.1 litres of fuel. Zenvo's got 4.9 litres, so you can see that Zenvo's been using a little bit more with the pace that he has in comparison to the other drivers. And his previous lap time was actually quite slow as well, 136.3. He's made a major mistake somewhere along the line, potentially be caught up with some traffic, or he's had a half spin, because we saw him earlier with a good 16 odd second lead, and that's now down to less than 5 seconds, or at least around 5 seconds at the moment. You can see he's coming past a couple of the Corvettes at the moment before launching himself into turn 1, getting the car very nicely slowed down indeed. And that is Marauder chasing down Lama. I believe Lama has taken a position away from Marauder, because we did see that Lama had a nightmare start and had dropped down into 10th position previously. He's now back up into P6. A flash of the lights there from Zenvo, just to alert Marauder to his presence, and Marauder gets quite nicely out of the way on the apex of the Western Horseshoe. GTE driver doing a good job of holding their line and facilitating the pass of the LMP1 cars, and I think there may have been a tap between Lama and Marauder there in turn 6. Is Lama getting to the slipstream and having to go around the outside, so he momentarily lost the position to the Porsche driver. They're side by side coming towards the bus stop chicane. Who's going to be the later of the late breakers? But actually Lama could be boxed in here by the Ferrari. They're just about going to be able to squeeze through. Ferrari's having to take to the grass to avoid impeding those two LMP1 drivers. So it gets quite nicely out of the way, but that's allowed Marauder to regain and hold on to 6th position. Lama, though, we're picking up the slipstream of the Porsche 919 in front of him. However, he is quite far back. I mean, it's around 7/10 of a second at the moment, so we will be getting a little bit of a slipstream, but it's not going to be enough. See, they're hitting 318 kilometers an hour before slamming on the brakes and getting the car slowed down. So the race leader now into the pit lane to serve his first pit stop of the race, obviously refueling the car, and now be refueling up to around 45 litres, I believe it is. Sorry, 50 litres that the Audi R18 has, and I believe it is a 64 litre tank that the Toyota and the Porsche has. So there's a good 14-15 odd litres between the difference between the Audi R18 fuel tank and the other two LMP1 cars. But he's now coming out of the pits, rejoining in 3rd position. Colonel McCoy, where are you, sir? You were just coming through the International Horseshoe, turn 3, so there's not much of a difference in track space between Zenvo and Colonel McCoy. There you can see the delta is now updated between the two drivers, and it's around that 10.5 second mark between the two, as Colonel McCoy gets very wide there on the exit of turn 5. dipping the wheels out onto the grass. Having a very squirrely moment, but he did a very good job of holding on to that. And Chris Johnston, the black puffs of smoke that you'll probably be seeing is the drivers locking up their wheels under braking, as both the GTE cars and also the LMP1 cars, neither of them have ABS. However, they do have traction control, as Conor McCoy very deep there in the braking zone, almost making contact with the Corvette there in front of him. Zenvo's now got the gap down to 6.5 seconds after those two mistakes from Conor McCoy on this lap alone, and also probably Zenvo's pace is probably contributing to that as well. Yamo is still going round. He will more than likely be pitting at the end of this lap, though, as he was a little bit wide there coming into the Western Horseshoe, but did manage a good job of slowing it down and getting it kept on the track, as we're seeing the LMP1 cars going either side of a Ford GT. The battle between Lama and Marauder is still ongoing. At the moment, Lama has just managed to get himself ahead of the Porsche driver. Didn't quite have the boost, did Marauder, to really challenge him coming off of turn 6 and through Speedway 1 and 2 towards the bus stop. But, he may get a bit of a run coming off of the bus stop chicane there, and obviously with recharging a little bit whilst being on full throttle as well, it's allowing him to close up a little bit onto Lama, unless Lama has hold a little bit of hybrid in reserve, picking up the slipstream, going around the outside of the Audi driver. Titanic battle unfolding between the two drivers as the race leader Yamo is now into the pit lane, but Marauder gets himself up into 6th place and holds on to that momentarily, but he does run deep on the outside of turn 1 and has lost the position again to Lama. Lama just getting the corner hooked up, was able to retake that position after Marauder's mistake, but Lama getting very sideways on the exit there of turn 3, but has done a good job to hold on to that. So he still holds on to 6th position. Marauder being demoted back down to 7th place. You see a little bit more lap traffic here in play as well, as again Lama is looking a little bit squirrely there through the apex of turn 6. Flash of the lights from the Corvette driver. Marauder didn't really seem to get impeded by him all that much. So Dowking is now closed up onto the back of Smolder, and he has actually managed to get himself back up into 5th place. So Dowking has been making quite considerable gains. The Smolder is actually there right before the taking. I think Dowking's going to sail past him as it come across the start-finish line. He'll get that move done and dusted before turn 1. I doubt Smolder is going to come back at him under the braking zone, which he does not. You can see that Dowking's got 48 litres of fuel there. Smolder's still got 24 litres of fuel in the tank, and Bo is 1.7 seconds, so it's not the Ford GT that we're seeing immediately behind this Aston Martin. Bo is that Ford GT there in the foreground of the picture, so there is a little bit of lap traffic between the two, but Dowking doing a very solid job to get himself back up to 4th position after the damage that he incurred earlier on in the race. Kuza just coming into the bus stop chicane, 22 litres of fuel to his name. He's got a 28-second gap between himself and Dowking behind, and he's best part of 12 seconds to 2nd place man Scott, who has lost quite a bit of time to Mr. Van Orman. When we previously saw these two drivers, they were fighting over the lead in GTE class, but the gap is around about 6.5 to 7 seconds. So we've got an Audi R18 coming out of the pit lane. This could be fairly close between the two drivers. Audi managing to get ahead, but he was effectively off the track on the inside. Whoa! So he has a little bit of oversteer there on the exit of turn 3, but yeah, does manage to hold on to that in the end. We're seeing Inky Chris is fairly close to the back of Yamo, but Inky Chris is still yet to make his pit stop. Obviously the Audi R18s have made theirs. Coxon is now in the pits, just 0.7 litres of fuel in his tank, so he'll be filling that back up to the brim, and he'll have at least one more stop before the end. I'm pretty sure that the Audi the Audis will need to make 3 stops in this race. We still have 1 hour and 38 minutes remaining. I'm pretty sure the Audi R18s do have to make 3 stops, and depending on how much fuel saving the Porsches and the Toyotas are able to do, they may be able to do it with 2 stops, but more than likely they'll also need to make 3 stops as well. So Inky Chris up into 3rd position. He'll be making his pit stop in a couple of laps time. See there, Colonel McCoy going around in 4th place at the moment. Marauder in 5th place in that second Porsche 919 hybrid. And you can see Andrex in 6th place after his pit stop. So a couple of drivers yet to make their pit stops. We'll sort the order back out. I believe Andrex was in 4th position when he came in to take on fuel. Obviously Coxon has rejoined on the track, back in 7th position, pretty much where he was before his stop. Lama is there, he's made his pit stop as well, so he's back out on track in 8th place. But he was battling with one of the Porsches previously. Kleinstein is there running in 9th position at the moment, and there's Logan, sole remaining Toyota, in 10th place. So we've lost one of our LMP1 drivers. I can't quite remember who the other LMP1 driver was. It was a name that I recognise, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head, unfortunately. So I do apologise to you if you're tuning in. Peter Haywood saying that he lost his wheel twice. We did see one of the Toyotas part between the outside of turn 1 and the outside of turn 6. And I'm actually seeing Bo is actually closed up onto the back of Smolder in GTE, battle for 5th position. So we'll stick with these 2 drivers for the moment. They've got some LMP1 cars coming up behind them, but looking from Bo's perspective there, you can see the difference between the 2. 4.5 tenths of a second. 3, maybe 4 car lengths between the 2, and there goes the LMP1 car up around the outside in Speedway 1 and 2. So Smolder will be giving a little bit of a slipstream advantage to Bo coming down the back straight, but it seems like the Aston Martin is quite slippery in a straight line, is continuing to eke out that gap a little bit. Before coming into the braking zone, Bo's got it very, very horribly wrong though. Had to completely bail out of trying to actually make it through the bus stop chicane, and instead just goes across the grass on the escape road on the inside. I believe he slowed down enough to avoid getting a slow down warning that he would have had to clear, so he'll be able to get straight back on the power and accelerate away. But obviously that has cost him the best part of 2 seconds to Smolder in front, so certainly not ideal. Inky Chris has served his pit stop, so he'll be coming out of the pit lane, and I believe that's Andrex that's there behind him, very close in proximity, I believe. Yes, it is. So Inky Chris has managed to get himself up into 5th place ahead of Andrex. Andrex may have had a slow pit stop somewhere along the line, potentially had to maybe repair some damage, but he's closed up quite tremendously with the hybrid power coming up towards the kink of turn 4. We're now going through turn 5. So Inky Chris may potentially just be holding and saving some of the hybrid for coming out onto the oval section of the circuit to allow him to defend to Andrex. Andrex now dumping the hybrid, allowing him to accelerate up to a higher speed. Doesn't seem to be using hybrid anymore, but he's in the slipstream and he's closing up onto the back of the Porsche in front of him. Inky Chris going defensive, coming towards the bus stop chicane. No doubt that Andrex is going to play it safe, but Inky Chris has gone deep, going through the bus stop. He's completely missed the first two corners. That's going to be a slowdown for him, so he's going to go high. That's going to allow Andrex to go through, not without getting very, very close between the 2 of them though. And that is 5th position handed back to Andrex. Obviously Inky Chris will be kicking himself about that, because that was just a very simple mistake that he made there, which afforded Andrex the opportunity to get back up into 4th place. As I say, Marauder is now in the pit lane. Empower down in 8th position, but he's made a pit stop. We can see that with the amount of fuel that he has on his car. He's actually very close up onto the back of Gabrielson as we can see, Corvette power versus Porsche power, and Corvette power winning hands over fist. Going around the outside, I think Gabrielson may have lifted slightly just to allow M-Power to get past a little bit more smoothly, because they did exchange a nice courtesy flash of lights there between the two drivers. Rauder now coming out of the pit lane, but he'll have those Corvettes around his outside, as you can see. So we'll be using the hybrid coming out of the pit lane here to accelerate hard coming off the corner, or coming out of the pit lane, shall I say, before braking hard coming into turn 3, and then again we'll be using the hybrid to accelerate once more, as we now see Bo is into the pit lane, dropping down into 9th place, taking on a full fuel tank, sorry. So Brzancek is now up into 8th place. Haven't really seen too much of Brzancek in this race, having a relatively quiet one. He's got 12-second gap to Chloe behind. He's 21 seconds off the back of Gabrielson. That would have been one of the, I believe, the leading GTE drivers. I think it was Scott that was actually going past Brzancek there, putting a lap down on him. Let's bring up the track map and actually keep that up for you guys as well, just so they can see who is on the same lap as the drivers that we're actually watching. That'll be indicated with the white dot. The driver that we're actually watching is represented by the blue arrowhead. It's going through turn 6 up onto the banking just up here where the mouse is. Any of the blue dots means that they are a lap down to the driver that we're watching, and then any of the red dots means that they are a lap ahead or have lapped the driver that we're watching. So that's what the colours actually represent and what they mean. So a nice little bit of information there for you guys. But yeah, Scott trundling away at the moment. His previous lap time was better than Mr. Van Orman's. Mr. Van Orman did a 141.5, whereas Scott did a 141.2. So there was a bit of a difference between the two of them, about 2.5 tenths of a second. We'll see what the drivers actually do this time. Mr. Van Orman with a 42.1, and Scott does a 41.2. So closing up by 9 tenths of a second on the previous lap. That was very, very sideways by Scott there going through turn 1, but very nicely held by Yusa. He continues on his way, probably without losing too much time. So the gap between the leading pair in the GTE class decreasing a little bit. Dakusa though in the 43s, low 43s on his previous lap, and then actually Dowking, his previous lap was a 41.4, and he'll be coming across the line in a very short moment's time to do a mid 41.5. So he is on the pace, closing that gap down to Dakusa in front of him. Again, he's stepping out the rear end slightly as well, coming through turn 1, but the other driver who is in the 41s is M-Power, who's also approaching the start-finish line. Smolder, his previous lap time was a 43.8. M-Power was doing a 41.7, so 2 whole seconds, sorry, not 2 tenths of a second, 2 whole seconds M-Power took out of Smolder on the previous lap. So the field has spread out a little bit more, and quite a while ago I said let's take a look at the penalties, so let's go and do that as we jump to Zenvo at the lead of the field, and he's got a 9-second penalty with his name. Yamo has also got a penalty of 5 seconds. Canon McCoy's got a 2-second penalty. Andrex has got a 1-second penalty. Inky Chris has got a penalty of 1 second as well. Coxon doesn't have any penalties as of yet, but he's still got an hour and a half's worth of driving, so plenty of time to put a penalty to his name if he so wishes. Lama in 7th place has got a penalty of 4 seconds, Marauder 3 seconds. See, Logan's got 6 seconds. Our GTE leader, Mr. Van Orman, has got a 7-second penalty. Scott 4 seconds. Dakusa a 2-second penalty. Dowking with a 5-second penalty. 7-second penalty to M-Power. Pat Gabrielson has got a 1-second penalty to his name. Chloe has got a 10-second penalty. 5-second penalty to Colin. And then Royalty has got a 32-second penalty. So he is leading the way in the penalty board. at the moment at this stage in the race, in 14th place in class. And then Atlas Guerin has got a 7-second penalty as well. So there's a penalty update for you. The majority of the drivers have got penalties at the moment. I imagine the majority of those have probably come from either the exit of turn 3, if they do run out very wide, but I'm pretty sure you can run over around the outside of that white line and go right up to the curbing. But the main culprit will be the bus stop chicane. We've seen quite a few people making little mistakes there, hopping across the curbs. And, oh, there may be contact there actually between one of the lap drivers and Zenvo. Coming into the braking stone of the bus stop chicane, we saw one of them immediately snap to the right. I believe it may have been Coxon. That was the driver in question. So Coxon is there, just coming up towards the pit lane now. And Zenvo has just gone across the start-finish line. So I believe it may have been Coxon that was caught up in that altercation between the two drivers. Hopefully he didn't incur any damage. He did go quite violently towards the wall off to the right, but I don't think there was actually any contact. And actually Zenvo has had contact somewhere along the line, because he's now lost the front headlight. He's got quite a bit of damage to the front of his car, but most importantly, he has lost the lead to Yarmo. I believe there may have been contact with one of the GTE cars coming into turn 1. That can only be my explanation there, because we saw him going across the start-finish line quite cleanly without any damage. And then next time we pick him up, coming out the exit of the first turn, and there being quite a bit of traffic with the GTE cars, I can only assume that Zenvo's made a mistake somewhere and has gone into the back of one of the GTE cars, but that's gone and gifted the lead to Yarmo, a fan favourite in the GT3 field. Also seeing a number of his fans here in the chat as well, so no doubt that they'll be happy to see their man up into the lead of the race. Making quite nice work of that Ford GT there, just playing it patient, not taking too much risks, as it's very important to try and not get caught up right up underneath the rear wing of one of the slower class cars, because that would just hinder your exit coming off the corner. So it's better to just lift off a little bit in the approach to the turn, give yourself that breathing room and give yourself the run coming off the turn. Now seeing Mr. Van Olmen in the pit lane with 3.2 litres of fuel when we've picked him up. He'll be obviously taking on a full fuel tank, where Scott is continuing on. We did see him have a 2-litre advantage to Mr. Van Olmen earlier on in the race, and obviously he is putting that to good use by being able to go a lap longer. But, some of the drivers, some of the people in chat were asking where Mally was. There he is, he's 15th in class. He's got a 27-second gap to Flaming Parrot in front of him. He's the only running Ferrari 488 that we've seen in the league so far. Some of these drivers are reserves. There were a number of drivers who are meant to be regularly participating in the league not being able to make this opening round, but hopefully we'll see him in round 2 in 2 weeks' time, as Mr. Van Olmen is coming out of the pit lane just in front of us here as we're watching Mally back up. And yeah, let's jump to Bo, who we can see is in 9th position now, under a second between himself and Chloe in front, as Bat Gabrielson is now into the pit lane as well. See that there on the left hand side. Wonder if Bo will be able to close up and potentially threaten the position. Let's have a quick look to see where Lama and Coxon are in relation to each other. 0.3 of a second between the two. That's a spinning Corvette there just in front of him. Doesn't collect either of the two Audis, which is good, but obviously that Corvette would have picked up quite a bit of damage. Who was that? It was Xeon. I think that tap with the front, with the wall may have actually been quite light. It looks like there's a little bit of damage to the rear of his car, but it doesn't seem like there's any substantial damage to the front. He's got Colin now within 2.5 seconds behind him. as we're now actually seeing Chloe, Beck Gabrielson, and also Brzanczek now into the pit lane. Beck Gabrielson is actually coming out of the pits. I panicked for a moment there because I saw the pit indicator disappear in my peripherals, but I thought that Gabrielson had potentially lost connection to the session, but fortunately he has not. He was just exiting the pit lane. He is back out on track with a full tank of fuel, resuming out in 8th position. So Coxon and Lama have now actually switched positions. But now Coxon and Lama are actually going to switch positions again, just as we pick them up. Coxon getting the good run coming off of the exit of the bus stop chicane, retaking that 6th position from Lama as Lama is trying to recover his race after a poor start. Less than a second between the two. Coming into the braking zone of turn 1, Coxon will be looking to try and make the apex quite nicely. He doesn't really run too deep coming into turn 1, so he survives that one. And then Zemvo is now down in 4th position, so he's been into the pit lane to repair the damage that he had earlier. So obviously the contact that he had with someone was substantial enough to incur quite a bit of damage to the front of his car, forcing him to pit. He's now in 4th position. Andrex is right there in front of him in 3rd place. Zemvo will be looking to pick up the slipstream and dump a load of the hybrid coming off the exit of the bus stop chicane, but it looks like that Andrex has held a little bit of hybrid energy in reserve to use in defence coming off the exit of the bus stop to eke out a half-second gap between himself and Zemvo, who we're currently riding on board with. But Zemvo has been showing some extremely strong pace over the course of the race as Andrex locks up the inside, front left a little bit, coming into the apex of turn 1, and there's quite a lot of hybrid energy that Zemvo has just dumped there. Coming through turn 2, that's going to be him up the inside of Andrex and him up into 3rd position. I think Andrex is quite wise to not really fight that position too hard, just let him go and see if he can somewhat use some of Zemvo's pace to help close up towards the back of Colonel McCoy. There's still 1 hour and 21 minutes remaining in the race, so there's a long way to go. Anything can happen still at this stage, as Logan is now into the pit lane to top up the fuel tank in his Toyota. Also Speedy Go is into the pit lane as well with 1.9 litres of fuel left in his tank, so he wasn't able to go another lap longer, and instead is making his pit stop to take on some fuel and potentially some fresh tyres as well. Excuse me a second whilst I just close up the window here in the cabin. And Speedy Go just double checking that his lights are on as he comes out the pit lane. There is actually also another driver there who is retired. I believe that may have been Colin. We're down to 26 drivers now out of 27, so I think it may be Colin that we saw retired in his pit box. Atlas Guerin is at the back of the field, quite a distance off the back of Royalty. You can see 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and Atlas Guerin running very deep there in turn 1 as well. Obviously the car is really not where he wants it to be. It's really struggling. But Yarmo, now the race leader with a 35 to 36 second lead to Colonel McCoy after Zemvo's incident. So now all Yarmo needs to do really is just keep a nice level head, play it safe and steady, not make any risks, and there you can see backing out, approaching the King. There wasn't really any real need to send it up the inside of the Corvette and risk making contact, especially in such a high-speed corner where a mistake could be quite catastrophic, with the wall being very close on the left-hand side of the track. If he goes hard into that, obviously that's going to be a lot of damage to his car and potentially put him out of race-winning contention. So he just needs to play it cool, keep a level head, be patient with the lap traffic, just run his race, and we'll see how he does towards the end of the race. Colonel McCoy is there looking up the inside of one of the Corvettes. Not quite able to get the move done on the apex, but he's able to do so out through the exit. He's got Zenvo 16.5 seconds or so off behind him. He's losing time to Yamo in front. Both drivers in the 1:30s on the previous lap, but that could have quite easily have been down to traffic rather than them just backing off significantly in terms of race pace. So let's jump up to Lama and Coxon as they are still battling away. Half a second or so between the two drivers. Coxon leading Lama as they come across the start-finish line again. They'll now be on, I believe, lap 42 for them. I'm pretty sure that they have been lapped by the front runners. Coxon at the moment still holding that gap just under half a second. You can see the horizon of the sky is starting to get a little bit light. It's not quite the midnight black or the midnight blue that we had previously. It's now becoming a lighter shade as the sun is starting to creep towards the horizon, and we'll be going back into the day. So that'll be an interesting factor for the drivers as they've been continuing with the night for the majority of the race so far. We'll be going into some low light conditions. The sun will be a little bit blinding for a lap or two before it ekes up high enough that it gets into the banners and the sun visors of the top or the cockpits of the cars. And obviously, as it continues to get higher, it gets even further out of the driver's eyes, and the visibility greatly increases, despite the visibility being absolutely fantastic here at Daytona, with the floodlights around the circuit lighting up the oval and the entire stadium section, with a huge, humongous grandstand that we can see there off to the driver's right, which I imagine standing at the top will give you absolutely fantastic views of the entire race circuit. Definitely a spectator's grandstand as Coxon's getting caught up with a little bit of LMP traffic, but Lama's gone and lost the rear of the car, jumping hard on the accelerator and trying to get hard on the hybrid boost coming out of turn 3. Lost the rear end, so that's cost him about a second to Coxon in front. Manages to dispatch one of the GTE cars. And there goes the second of Smolder. So now he's got a bit of clear air in front of him, but yeah, he's lost the ground to Coxon in front with that mistake, just being a little bit too eager on the gas. Lit up the rear tyres and almost half spun off to the right hand side, and you can definitely see the track, or should I say the sky and the horizon getting quite a bit lighter. But Lama's going to have to settle in behind, I believe that is Dowking and one of the other GTE drivers. Now he is able to go past, but you can see the time that he has lost to Coxon in front of him. The gap was previously about 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 seconds. The gap is now it's increased quite dramatically. There it goes, going slightly back down again, but it's now up at around 3 seconds. I think Coxon may have dumped a bit more hybrid boost. Coming onto the straight, was able to pull away. Coxon getting caught up behind the Ford GT a little bit, but now Lama's getting caught up behind the Ford GT coming through turn 2. It's going to impede him slightly, but not as much as it impeded Coxon, because the gap is now halved. Although Lama didn't have the best of runs coming off the corner. So let's jump to the GTE drivers as M-Power has now closed back up onto Scott. There is an MP1 car on his outside there, as you can see. And the Toyota's got it very, very wrong, and so is that. Who was that? Oh, Lama's had a spin coming off the exit of turn 5. So that's him losing a ton more time. But who was having a spin that we saw earlier? Was it Colonel McCoy? I'm not entirely sure. It's definitely not Dowking. May have been Cleanstein, potentially. I'm not entirely sure. I think it might have actually been Cleanstein. Yeah, it was, because Logan isn't too far behind on track, but picked him up in the background of the the Scott and Empower battle, and he was kind of veering off towards the pit wall. So I think he managed to keep himself out of it. So yeah, Scott and Empower continuing on. Mr. Van Orman currently in second place at the moment. Dowking has got the lead back, but he's only got 5.1 litres of fuel. He's kind of out of sync to the rest of the GT cars, as he had to pit for repairing the damage earlier. It's a little bit wide on the entry to turn 1, but I guess he got it back to the inside, but that would have cost him time. To Mr. Van Orman, provided Mr. Van Orman gets a good clean run through the first turn. He's got a little bit of traffic here in front of him that he's needing to deal with, but that Ford GT gets very nicely out of his way, and he can continue on. Smolder is very, very close there to one of the other drivers. As Scott has gone and lost the car in the braking zone for turn 1. He was out wide on the outside there upon the entry, facing the wrong way. He's managed to get the car back onto the circuit though without seeming to pick up any damage. So don't know whether that was a mistake on his own or if there was a contact between himself and Empower, but that's now Empower up into third place. Scott down into fourth. So that has now let Empower go. So let's jump back up to our race leader, Yamo. See, 1 minute 28.7 on his previous lap, so good race pace for the Audi driver at the head of the field. Let's actually take a look at some of the perspectives that the drivers are having at the moment. So we're seeing Royalty here with what looks like I think he might be driving with a controller, judging by excuse me, judging by the steering inputs. I think Royalty may be driving with a controller there, hence the jerky hand movement. But obviously the Ford GT, decent visibility out the front of that car. Malibako has pretty good visibility, but a very cracked windscreen there, as you can see, so that's hindering his visibility a little bit. Speedy Go is there in the Ford GT, and that looks a little bit smoother in terms of hand movement, so I think Royalty is using a controller. Flame and Parrot is also in the Ford GT. That's the view from one of the Corvettes. Decent visibility there for him. Smolder has got pretty good visibility as well, even though that sun strip at the top of the car, the head of that windscreen, is quite low. But at least he's still able to see a decent portion of the track. That's Chloe's view out the BMW M6. Good visibility for that one. And I think we may have lost our Porsche driver. Nope, Pat Gabrielson still going. That's the view out of the Porsche 911. So decent visibility there, but if we go and take a look at the LMP1 field, that's the visibility out of the front of the Toyota, so still pretty good, pretty reasonable. The wheel arches are relatively high, but not quite as high and as impeding as the Porsche 911, but the windscreen appears to be quite a bit higher with the nice bubble shape that it has. So Marauder has got a pretty decent view out the front of the 919, but if we jump to Yarmo, that is the view out the front of the Audi R18. It's very much a tight letterbox view, quite wide, and the wheel arches doesn't really impede the view out the front too heavily, but it is quite a low cockpit in the Audi R18. So that is what they're having to contend with, and as you can see, the sun is now very much above the horizon line and it's starting to cast some light onto the circuit, which means that the track is now going to start heating up and increasing in temperature as my voice is starting to waver a little bit. So yeah, as those track temperatures increase, that's obviously going to affect the performance of the tyres. And generally, providing that the track isn't too extortionately hot, the LMP1 cars do pretty well on the soft tyres. That is obviously providing the track is not too hot, and also there isn't too many corners. Here at Daytona, I imagine they'll be able to run on the soft tyres perfectly fine without too much issue. And one thing that I have just noticed, we seem to be missing a Zunvo from the leaderboard. We're down to 25 drivers in total, 9 LMP1 cars, and I do not see him on the leaderboard at all. So our previous race leader, as Jarmo locks up the brakes there, coming into turn 3, but manages to keep it on track. Our previous race leader now seems to be out of the race, which means Andrex is up into second position. However, Colonel McCoy, who was previously holding second position, has just served a pit stop. You can see he's got 50 litres of fuel on board his car. Andrex has got 2.2, so Andrex will be making a pit stop in the next lap or so. Yarmo's got a little bit more, 7.9, so Yarmo's been doing a pretty good job of fuel saving over the course. Ooh, excuse me, over the course of the race. Wasn't expecting that one to sneak up on me and slip out. Apologies for that. But yeah, Inky Chris in the Porsche 919. Losing my words slightly now. Slightly lost my train of thought. As you can see, it's got 23.5 or so, best part of litres of fuel. Looked like there's quite a bit of damage to the front splitter. It looked very, very bent, which obviously would do him absolutely no favours in terms of aerodynamics. So allow a little bit more airflow underneath the car, which would be good. More air going into that rear diffuser, give you more rear downforce, but not good in terms of straight line speed and aero efficiency, as that will be producing quite a bit more drag than he would like. So Andrex is now in the pits. He has just taken on a full tank of fuel and is now making his way down pit lane to come out the exit of that. There's Colonel McCoy, who's just coming into turn 1 now, running a little bit deep. Where is Andrex actually in relation to him? Andrex is on the inside of that pit wall. Colonel McCoy is going to come out in front. There's probably going to be a good 5-6 second gap between the two, though. In terms of on-track space, we'll see the Delta update. There we go. It wasn't far off, 7 seconds between the two Audi R18 drivers. Andrex just taking his time behind the Corvette there in front of him. Now he'll slip past, coming into the braking zone for the turn 5 International Horseshoe. So slip past that Ford GT as well. Colonel McCoy now less than 4 seconds in front. So Andrex making pretty good work of the traffic. Was able to gain some time, whereas Colonel McCoy struggled a little bit behind a couple of cars and has lost some time to Andrex. A good 2.5 seconds or so between the two. So Coxon there in 5th position. Lama's 5 seconds off the bat, but we did see that when these two were battling, Lama made a mistake and had a bit of a half spin, which put him off the back of the 5th place driver. Yeah, Lama's got 10.5 litres of fuel remaining in his tank. Lama a little bit less, just under 9 litres. Border is up at 25. 38 for Cleanstein, although that's probably going to be a slowdown penalty for him, judging by the way that he took that bus stop chicane. And then Logan's got 41 litres of fuel, so he's been through the pits a lot more recently than a number of the other drivers. Let's take a look at the head of the GTE field. Mr. Van Orman, a reasonably comfortable lead of 15.5 seconds or so. Bit of a lock up there though, coming into the Western Horseshoe, turn 5. But, manages to get the car slowed down quite nicely. He's still continuing on round, but obviously that's going to eat a little bit of the life out of the tyres. So now actually seeing Malibako coming into the pit lane in the Ferrari. Coming in with 1.5 litres of fuel, so he'll be filling that back up to the brim and trying to make it for the remainder of the race. We've got just over an hour remaining, 1 hour and 3 minutes still to go. And yeah, with that, he may be able to make the full race distance. I'm not entirely... I'm pretty sure the GT cars should be able to do an hour long stint. So if he does a little bit of fuel saving, he should be good for the remainder of the race. Speedy Go. He's closed up onto the backs of Xeon in front of him. There you can see the gap between the two drivers. Xeon is the car immediately in front of us. Corvette driver. And Speedy Go here in the Ford GT. Xeon taking a very interesting line coming into turn 1, has got out very, very wide and just handed that position to Speedy Go. Thought he was being very, very cautious going into the braking zone of that first turn, and then just went super deep upon the entry. So that's handed 10th place to Speedy Go. Xeon's now been demoted down into 11th place. Audi R18 ripping through the inside, coming into the kink, as Yamo is now coming in to serve his next pit stop. Second pit stop of the race, I believe, with 1.5 litres of fuel on board. So he'll be looking to top that back up to the full tank. We'll actually sit with him as well to see if he does do a tyre change or not in this pit stop. So it'll be 50 litres that he fuels up to. And Lollipop is raised, but he is still there stationary, so I believe he is taking tyres in this stop, which makes sense. Coming now into the day portion of the race. Obviously with the changing track temperature, he'll be wanting to have a good set of boots underneath him. May potentially be swapping from a soft tyre onto a hard tyre as well, just for the hotter weather conditions. Or he just could be going for another set of softs, but wanting the wanting the fresh grip and the fresh rubber, so that he's not having to worry about driving tyres that may potentially get hot from time to time on tyres that are towards the end of their life and not really providing too much grip anyway. So Yomo deploying a pretty sound strategy in my eyes. If he did take tyres there, oh, that's a back marker getting a little bit sideways. It's only Inky Chris who's on the same lap as Yamo at the moment. So is Colonel McCoy. Just seeing him flash up with a white dot as he comes across the start-finish line. So he's got Inky Chris 8.5 seconds or so up the road. Yamo is just coming into the bus stop chicane, being marked as the red dot, I believe. And it's where they are more than half a lap apart that the colour is changing from white to red, or in Yamo's case, white to blue. But Lama is now into the pit lane. 3 litres of fuel. Coming in to serve, I believe, his second stop as well. So, yeah, coming in and getting a fresh tank of fuel. I see that there's 32 of you still in the live stream. Give us a quick wave. Hello. Let us know how you guys are doing. If you have any questions that you would like to ask about AOR, about this race, about the LMP1 cars or the GTE cars, feel free to fire them into the chat, and I shall answer them when I see them. The field is pretty spread out at the moment. Inky Chris coming across the start-finish line in second position in the Porsche 919, doing a very solid job at the moment. He's still yet to make his stop, so he'll probably lose out a couple of positions, but I believe that he was 4th place previously. So yeah, doing a solid job in that Porsche 919. I'm not sure if he has participated in any of the AOR leagues previously, but it's the first time that I'm seeing him on track and commentating on him, so good effort there. Colin McCoy, commentated on a number of times in the past. He is still cracking on in 3rd place at the moment, but he has made his 2nd stop, so he'll be looking to more than likely pass Inky Chris when he comes into his pit stop. Well, he certainly will. The gap 8 seconds between the two of them now. Andrex out on track as well, 7.5 to 8 seconds behind Colonel McCoy, currently in 4th position. I believe a net 3rd place, so a net podium as it stands at the moment, as we are into the final hour now. Coxon running a relatively lonely race at the moment, 23.5 seconds up to Andrex in front of him. Marauder is 20.5 seconds behind, and then Marauder has got a 33-second gap to Lama behind him. Things are pretty spread out here in the LMP1 cars. Mr. Van Orman, 15 seconds to M-Power in 2nd place. Dakuza in 3rd place is a further 29 seconds off the back of M-Power. It's got a 15-second gap to Dowking in 4th place behind him, but has been passed by Dowking and has got a certainly not a minute and 13 odd seconds gap between the two, but it's not. It's actually 15 seconds. I think it's just where Dowking probably crossed over the pit exit round about there. It does throw the timings out a little bit. There's Smolder being passed by one of the Porsche 919s. Coming out through the final speedway turn towards the start-finish line in that glorious Aston Martin. Very pretty car. Produces a very nice sound as well. That V8. And Coxon is into the pit lane. He's just coming down pit road out towards the exit. So we see three cars flash past us in the braking zone of turn 1. Very cool to see them roll on through. Just about managing to keep it out the outside wall there was Coxon. He's got a LMP1 car there immediately in front of him. Is that Lama? No, it's not. Lama's 3 seconds up the road. I can see in the distance he's got 33 second gap to Clean Steam behind him. So there is Lama trying to work his way through some of the GTE traffic. He's doing a pretty good job of, although that looked almost like he was going a little bit deep there in the apex of turn 6, but managed to get the car slowed down enough, get it gathered back up again for the exit, and avoiding the tyre wall on the outside this time round. Yamo still leading to Inky Chris at the moment, 42 seconds between the two. And still 6.5 to 7 seconds between Inky Chris and Colonel McCoy. Difference between 2nd and 3rd position at the moment. Inky Chris did a 31.1 on the previous lap. This time round he's just done a 32.0. See what Colonel McCoy does this time round, a 31.3. So 0.7 of a second taken out between Colonel McCoy and Inky Chris. So on the previous lap that Colonel McCoy was also quicker than the Porsche driver as well, so the gap is decreasing and shrinking down, but Inky Chris is still yet to make his 2nd pit stop, which he'll be doing very soon. just under 6 litres of fuel remaining. Marauder still rolling around out there in 5th position at the moment. 11 litres of fuel to his name, only 0.02 of a second off of his fastest lap time he's done so far. And there he goes, improves by 3 tenths on his previous best lap. Obviously had a good run coming out of the bus stop chicane, and also picking up a little bit of slipstream as well off the Ford GT lap traffic as well. That would have helped him a little bit. So let's do another penalty update with Yamaha, our race leader. 5 seconds, Inky Chris, 1 second to his name. Conor McCoy, 2 seconds, 3 seconds now for Andrex. Marauder's also got 3 seconds. Lama has got 7 seconds to his name. Logan, our last LMP1 runner, has got 8 seconds. Mr. Van Orman has got 9 seconds. Empower has got 40 seconds to him. I can only imagine that he got caught speeding in the pit lane somewhere along the line. Either that, or he's passed the car somewhere along the line off track and has given him a 30-second penalty, which which he should be able to claim back from the stewards if it was if the avoiding action was necessary. Dakuza, 2 seconds to his name. Dowking has got 9-second penalty. Pat Gabrielson, 11 seconds. Chloe has got 11 seconds there, as you can see. 2 seconds to Zion Royalty, who was previously leading the penalty leaderboard times. He's got 32 seconds. That hasn't increased since we last looked. And Atlas Garen in last position, 24th out of the total 29 or 30 odd drivers that we had at the beginning of the session. He also has 7 seconds to his name as well. So Marauder just coming past the Corvette driver of Dowking, passing him quite comfortably before the the kink, and now Conor McCoy has just gone past Inky Chris as Inky Chris is into the pit lane. Andrex will also go past. She does so there. So Inky Chris now down into 4th position on track at the moment. His teammate Marauder, don't think is close enough behind to take that position away. There he is going through the Speedway 1 and 2. He's on the run down towards that bus stop chicane. So Inky Chris should comfortably come out in front of his teammate. Empower is also there in the pit lane as well. I believe Inky Chris taking the full fuel tank and also tyres to try and see him towards the end of the race, and he's teetering right on the edge of being able to do this with only 2 fuel stops. Generally the Toyota and the Audi can go about 50 odd minutes or so into a stint. It's around about, oh dear, that's one of the Ford GTs having a nightmare on the inside of turn 1. I believe he got underweight. Xeon's now in the pit lane as well. So where's Empower rejoining? He's coming back out onto the track in 4th position with a full tank of fuel. I imagine that he's taken a fresh set of boots as well. And now we get the updated deltas. So Dowking is 7 seconds up the road. In front of him, Bo is 12.5 seconds behind. There is that Ford GT driver just coming into the International Horseshoe. See Dowking there just going through Speedway 1 and 2. Powering on through. Tell you what I will do. Let's jump on board from the bonnet view of Yamo to give you a close to driver eye perspective And I'll just go quiet for a minute or two, just to let my voice rest a little bit, get a little bit of water, but also let you guys get a sense of the speed of these LMP1 cars, and also how they go about navigating the lap traffic. However, Yarmo's got quite a bit of clear air in front of him, so let's enjoy this on board for a couple of minutes with Yarmo just for the moment. So here we are returning at Daytona as we get Conor McCoy in the wall there. Andrex closing right back up onto the second place driver. Skirt with the wall in the entry to turn 1. That could have cost Conor McCoy a bit of damage. Almost cost him second position, but he's managed to hold on to it for a moment. We're riding on board with Yarmo and Mr. Van Orman those last couple of minutes, as Conor McCoy makes a mistake there on the apex of turn 5. He's gone and spun off to the inside of the circuit. That's allowed Andrex to get through and up into second position. Conor McCoy really struggling with the tyres, it seems, in these now probably what are going to be much hotter conditions than what they were running in the night. Perhaps Conor McCoy's just overheated his tyres a little bit, and they're really struggling to provide the grip that he needs, the grip that he wants. Scything down the inside of the Porsche 911, coming into the bus stop chicane. Obviously, probably absolutely kicking himself, losing that second position to Andrex. He'll be wanting to try and keep up onto the back of him and try and close back up a little bit more. battle for 11th position in the GTE class between Royalty and Xeon. We're currently watching Xeon here in the Corvette, but Royalty is just there. That Ford GT that's there in front of us. We've got Dalkin coming up behind to lap us, and also one of the LMP1 cars, and actually Royalty is diving into the pit lane to no doubt fill up his fuel tank, and Darrell King gets past Xeon without any issues as Xeon lifts off to let the Corvette driver put him a lap down, but then also ran a little bit deep. And Andrex has gone and lost the position to Conor McCoy again. They're side by side coming through turn 5 now into 6. Believe that Conor McCoy has got the inside line. Andrex going for a little bit of a switchback now. It's the battle of who's saved the most hybrid energy and who has got the run coming off of the corner. Relatively even between the two actually in terms of their hybrid deployment. Andrex has got the slipstream on the approach to the bus stop chicane. We've got Smolder in the Aston Martin up there in front of us. That could potentially impede Conor McCoy a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's going to affect him at all. Whereas Andrex had a pretty poor run through the bus stop chicane. Went a little bit deep on the brakes on the initial entry. It's going to cost him a couple of car lengths, but it looks like he's saved a little bit more of the hybrid boost. He's now actually diving into the pit lane. Diving into the pit lane to take on a full tank of fuel, no doubt, to see him to the end of the race. He's got good 20 odd litres there remaining, in and around that 42-minute mark. Yep, no doubt just taking on fuel there. Maybe a slight damage repair if anything, but I don't think he was stationary long enough to take a fresh set of tyres unless he was just replacing one of them. But obviously he's now got a full tank of fuel. That should see him to the end of the race, providing that he's got his fuel calculation right. He knows how long the car is able to do on a single stint, which from my experience last season was about 35 to 45 minutes depending on the amount of fuel used per lap and the circuit and how much fuel saving has been going on. But Andrex isn't one to get fuel calculations wrong. He has a lot of experience racing in the AOR leagues, doing both GT3 and also having raced previously in the endurance series as well, and also the IMSA Lights endurance series that finished a couple of weeks ago. So no doubt he will have done his homework and made sure that he's got enough fuel to see himself to the end without having to make one more stop. So the Audi drivers almost definitely will need 3 stops in this race. Pretty much all the drivers have gone and done 2 stops worth now. Inky Chris has been in, Marauder's definitely been in. Logan will be coming in very, very soon for his next stop. But yeah, Coxon not too far off the back of Lama. These two drivers have been swapping positions for quite a while now. Lama is currently leading Coxon by about 2 seconds at the moment. Coxon there running in 6th. Marauder 19.5 seconds off behind. As Atlas Guerin is in the pit lane, and that may be him overshooting his pit box. He was. So had to reverse back a little bit in order to get into the pit box for his pit crew to actually serve him. Just taking on the tiniest dash of fuel there. He seemed like he still had quite a lot, but I think he may actually be changing tyres or potentially be repairing damage. Which may be the reason for his pit stop. Jumping back up to the race leader, Yamo. 56.5 seconds now that he has a lead over Conor McCoy in 2nd place. And as we've seen, Conor McCoy has been very much under threat from Andrex. Conor McCoy is now into the pit stop to make his final stop. Andrex has served his final stop, so he'll be good on fuel. And Andrex will be pushing hard, especially seeing that Conor McCoy will be in the pit lane. He'll be pushing hard to to try and close that gap and try and leapfrog him in this pit stop phase. So we'll keep an eye on these two drivers. Colonel McCoy taking on 46 litres there, so there we go, 50 odd litres. So he has taken the full amount of fuel. Now he gets underway with a slight stutter initially. Andrex has gone through. Andrex has gone through and taken second position. He's through the apex of turn 1, going through turn 2 now, and Colonel McCoy is just going out of the pit lane, coming through the inside on that pit escape road. Through turn 2 has rejoined the track now, so Andrex has managed to gain track position over Colonel McCoy in that pit stop. Must be Andrex just being that little bit more aggressive coming into the pit lane, and just generally having a better lap with potentially with traffic. Didn't see if Colonel McCoy did get held up by any traffic as he goes sidling up the inside of Dowking there through the international horseshoe, but 8.5 seconds is a big loss. We did see him have a slight stutter rolling out of his pit box, so he may have been slow to get away, but that is quite a surprising difference between those two drivers. As Bo is into the pit lane from 5th position, he's got Smolder behind him. I think Smolder is the white dot that we've just seen come out of the bus stop chicane. Indeed it is. So Bo's got a fair amount of distance between himself and 6th position Smolder, taking on a full tank of fuel. He's now underway and rolling, but this could be pretty close between these two drivers. Smolder could potentially get Bo, and we will actually see that change of position. There he goes. See him there, just off ahead of us. So Bo will be able to see that, but obviously you need to have your wits about you about coming out the exit of the pit lane here at Daytona, because of that pit exit wall. It's so easy to go diving into there with a little bit too much speed, not get the speed bled off, and just understeering into that pit exit wall, which is obviously mighty frustrating having just been in the pit lane. But yeah, Bo being sensible about the pit exit and didn't have any issues there. Let's go and take a look at the front of the GTE field, as Dowking is currently in 3rd position at the moment. He's got a 6-second gap to Dakuza in 2nd place in front of him, and a 9-second gap to M-Power behind, but I'm pretty sure M-Power has just been into the pits. 66 litres, whereas Dowking has got 32, so Dowking is almost definitely going to need, or will certainly, shall I say, need to pit before the end of the race. I think M-Power should be good for the remainder of the race, so it might be very tight. Let's see, Dakuza is definitely going to need a pit. He's only got 10 litres to his name, and same with Mr. Van Orman, he's only got 10 litres as well. So these drivers will be coming in for a splash of fuel, but how much fuel they'll be taking on board is the key question. So we'll need to keep an eye out for when they take to the pits to see how much fuel they've taken on. Bo has got a very safe 80 litres of fuel as he goes very wide there in the entry to turn 1. Gap 3.5 seconds, just over 3 seconds to Smolder in front of him. Colonel McCoy has closed back up on towards the rear of Andrex. The gap is now under a second. It was a couple of seconds a lap or two ago, but traffic could have quite easily have interfered and come into play there. Either that or there's just a mistake from Andrex. Colonel McCoy going a little bit deep there though in the braking zone for turn 6. Andrex initially looked to be slow going in, but then it actually transpired that Colonel McCoy was going a little bit late, but Colonel McCoy's got quite a bit more hybrid energy deployed coming out of Speedway 2. Passes Andrex before the bus stop chicane, but I think Andrex tends to save a little bit more of the hybrid boost and deploys it to full effect coming off of the bus stop chicane and retakes that 2nd position. Quite a tremendous difference in speed. Colonel McCoy has now gone and used his hybrid boost to kind of counteract that as well, picking up the slipstream will scythe past Andrex to retake second position. These two drivers have swapped second position a number of times in this lap. A big lock up there from Conor McCoy. Conor McCoy's gone round. He's almost made contact with the wall. May have potentially stalled it slightly as well. Was a little bit slow to get away, but we saw him lock up quite heavily in the braking zone in the approach to the apex of turn 1. And then when he got there, he seemed to still have just a little bit too much speed, and the rear end just stepped out on him. Andrex did a phenomenal job to see that unfolding and get on the brakes to avoid making contact with him. He continues on his way unharmed in second place, and there's now a 7-second gap between the two drivers. Dakuza is now into the pit lane, so he's taking on fuel. How much fuel has he taken on? Exactly, it seems like just under 62 litres. That will almost certainly be enough to see him going to the end of the race. M-Power 62 litres, he should be safe as well. And he's got Dowking just under 10 seconds up the road. So M-Power should retake second place, as Mr. Van Ommen is now into the pit lane as well. So let's actually keep an eye on this one to see where M-Power and Mr. Van Ommen come out in relation to each other. Mr. Van Ommen is just going through turn 6. He's just going out onto the banking now, so does have good half a track or so to catch up. So unless Mr. Van Ommen has an absolute nightmare of a pit stop, I can't see the lead changing. Mr. Van Ommen taking on 62.5 litres of fuel as well. So he'll be good for the remainder of this race. Just under 32 minutes remaining. So they'll be pressing on, taking it nice and steady coming out of the pit lane. No issues there. And coming back out onto the track in the lead, Dowking has just come over the start-finish line and is now coming into the braking zone for turn 1, but he is still yet to make his pit stop. So Mr. Van Ommen has got a very healthy lead. 14 seconds to Dowking, and M-Power is a further 10 seconds behind. So 24 seconds between the two Corvette drivers. And Kleinstein now into the pit lane as well. He'll be topping up with fuel to make sure that he can get to the finish with his final stop. Marauder's got 44 litres remaining there. Kleinstein's got 47. So this is going to be interesting to see if Marauder and Inky Chris can actually go to the end. I don't think Inky Chris will be able to get to the race finish with just 35 litres of fuel remaining, as he's got a cart coming up behind him. It's not Lama. Lama is 40 seconds behind, so it is a driver that is being lapped, I assume, judging by the colour of the dot on the mini-map there. But yeah, Inky Chris will need to make one more stop. I'm pretty sure Marauder may need to make another stop as well, unless he starts to do some fuel saving. Could quite easily prove me wrong though. It's very close between those two. And then Logan, I am almost certain, is going to be absolutely dead safe with the 57.5 litres that he has on his Toyota. He should be able to make that 30 minutes remaining. So Mr. Van Ommen is on his way. Dowking there in second. Dakuza out of the pit lane, 30 seconds off the back of M-Power, 45 seconds to Bo, and then a 24.5 seconds gap to Bat Gabrielson, who is still yet to make his pit stop. He's got 8.5 litres in the fuel tank of his Porsche, so he will need to make one more stop before the end of the race. Smolder looking good though in terms of fuel. And as things seem to be relatively quiet at the moment, let's get into the penalties as well, the penalty update. So Atlas going 7 seconds, 32 seconds to Royalty. Zion's got 2 seconds to his name. 11 to Chloe. 1 second to Back Gabrielson. 2 seconds to Dakuza. Empower's 42 seconds. Dalking 11. Mr. Van Orman has got 9 seconds. Logan has got 11 as well. Broad has got 3 seconds. Llama has got 8. 1 second for Inky Chris. 2 seconds for Conan McCoy. 3 seconds for Andrex. And Yamo with a 6-second penalty. But as it stands at the moment, a lot of the drivers have quite significant gaps between them and their nearest competitors. So almost certainly should be good when the penalties get accounted for at the end, and I think there'll be a couple of penalties that will be knocked off for a couple of the drivers, or at least reduced for some of the drivers as well, if they ever occurred any, either in the in-game formation lap, or if they were taking avoiding action of an incident or a spinner and they had to go off track in order to avoid it. They can claim that 30-second penalty that they'd usually get from that back from the stewards, but of course they can't appeal their track limit penalties. So yeah, unfortunately they will have to stick with those. But Yamo has got, wow, he's a lap ahead of Andrex at the moment. You can see 1 minute 56 seconds between himself and Andrex. But Yamo is yet to make his third and final stop, as he's got just under 8 litres of fuel remaining. And Logan, now in 9th position, has got his sights locked in on Kleinstein in front of him for 8th place. And Kleinstein having a slight slide there through turn 6, managed to gather it back up though, still get on his way and still managing to actually pull ahead of Logan. Coming out the exit there, coming through Speedway 1 and 2, I think Logan may have just been holding off of the hybrid boost to allow the LMP1 to slide past and put a lap on him without too much issue. So now Logan's probably going to end up using that hybrid, but in doing so he's going to end up unlapping himself from that Audi. So it's kind of in a way a double-edged sword in terms of not using the hybrid to let a car go past and then saving it for later. And yeah, you have to wait for another point until that Audi gets further away from him, where he can really start to use it and dump a lot of it. And yep, as you say, Warlow in the chat, please, Yamo, do not forget to refuel the car. 6 litres of fuel remaining, so should be able to go on for another 2 laps. But yeah, you have such a great lead, mate, that you do not want to be throwing this one away with a simple mistake like that. Back Gabrielson into the pit lane to refuel his car. We saw him earlier with pretty low fuel, and Bzdanchek is now into the pit lane as well with 2.2 litres. Zion is fairly close to the back of Flaming Parrot. 1.2 seconds between the two of them. There is a LMP1 car between the Corvette and the Ford GT driver. Seems like Flaming Parrot will probably not be impeded by the LMP1 cars. That would have made very short work of the GTE on the banking section. Bzdanchek is now rolling out of the pit lane with 47 litres of fuel on board for himself. So Yamo still racing away. Now with the lead, 4.5 litres of fuel remaining. So he'll be making his pit stop. Probably not this lap, but maybe the next one. Or should I say, it should be the next one. If he wants to play it safe, he can quite easily pit on this lap, and he'll be able to put on the fuel that he needs for the remainder of the race. He won't need to take on a full tank. Will he pit this time round? Doesn't look like he is. I think he's just, yeah, he's going around again. So hopefully he'll make his pit stop on this lap. Otherwise we'll see some serious drama unfolding in this opening race of Season 5. It's been fairly action-packed in the early stage of the race. Quite a few incidents and half spins from drivers. A few mistakes as well. But things seem to have settled down in this second half of the race. Obviously, with it being the season opener, everyone tends to be a little bit nervous anyway. There's one of the 4 GTs in the background of the shot just there, taking a trip around the outside of turn 5 in the grass, doing a little bit of lawn mowing out there. But yeah, everyone tends to be a little bit nervous for the opening round. Obviously, want to try and play it relatively safe, but in doing so, sometimes they become too safe and then end up making mistakes or compromising, and Jarmo playing it safe there. I was initially going to say it would be best to stay behind the Corvette for the bus stop chicane, and then he kind of darted out as if to have a look, and then obviously slid himself back in. But he'll be wanting to come into the pit lane, and here he is coming in now to serve his final stop. And Colonel McCoy is also in the pit lane to serve a pit stop as well, but I'm pretty sure he was good on fuel for the remainder of the race, unless he has misjudged. Either that, or he's having to repair a load of damage and is conceding that 3rd place to Inky Chris. Oh, also 4th place as well to Llama. Llama's now actually gone through as well, so Llama now up into 4th. Colonel McCoy now down in 5th. Where is Marauder on track? He's just coming across the start-finish line now as well, so Colonel McCoy could be losing 5th place to Marauder. He's now underway and rolling and moving, but yeah, now Colonel McCoy's down into 6th position, so I can only imagine that was damage that he was having to go into the pit lane to fix in order for him to lose those 2 positions. Obviously, Inky Chris is now almost a lap ahead of Colonel McCoy because of that. Inky Chris is just going through turn 3, and Colonel McCoy is on the run down to turn 4. So there's turn 4 there for Colonel McCoy, and actually in the background of the shot you see Inky Chris. So Colonel McCoy has lost an absolute heap of time. Who was that going around there? It was one of the Audi drivers. It wasn't Marauder who was in front of him. Llama is still pressing on. Was it Andrex? No, I don't think it was Andrex. It may have been Yarmo. Potentially. I don't know. But even still, Yarmo has got a nice healthy lead of 1 minute, as you can see. Logan has retired from the race at the back of the LMP1 field as Yarmo's darting to the inside of Dowking there before the bus stop chicane. That was slightly unnecessary, but at least he did it safely. But yeah, unfortunate to see Logan having retired from the race, being hit in the rear by Colonel McCoy apparently, so that could potentially explain why Colonel McCoy was into the pit lane to repair some damage in the collision between himself and Logan. Obviously Logan running out the back of the field. He wasn't far off the back of Kleinstein, is actually here in front of Yarmo. He wasn't too far off the back of Kleinstein when we last saw the pair, but obviously with a ton of damage as well. And only 20 odd minutes, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to close back up. And Llama's gone and lost the position to Colonel McCoy. Llama's gone and made a mistake somewhere along the line and has lost and conceded that 5th position, but he is right there, half a second behind. Colonel McCoy's gone and run out wide on the exit of turn 6. That is almost certainly going to be a slowdown penalty for him, which he will need to serve now and try and clear prior to the bus stop chicane. Either that, or he's just going to take it and absorb it and see if he can try and eke out the gap to Llama in order to cover off of that penalty. Llama is just a few tenths behind Colonel McCoy, but struggling in the dirty air through the bus stop chicane, but now dumping a load of hybrid energy. Keeping that gap relatively consistent, but Conor McCoy is slowly but surely eking out 100th with each second passing, and that gap is increasing between the two of them. Conor McCoy got a much slipperier car, but he's had to go very wide going around the outside of the Ford GT. The Ford GT kind of all over the road, blocking Llama a little bit. Llama could have, if that Ford GT was staying a little bit clearer, or if Llama read that situation a little bit better, he could have closed up even more onto Conor McCoy, but yeah, unfortunately he got caught up behind the Ford GT, which impeded his progress a little bit there. Let's take a look at the gap between Inky Chris and Andrex. Only 9 seconds at the moment, although Inky Chris is very marginal on fuel. Once again, there's a Ford GT off in the background on the outside of turn 5. But yeah, Inky Chris is almost definitely going to have to pit before the end of the race, so Andrex isn't going to feel too threatened in terms of position on that second place. However, he is running it very tight on fuel. As you can see, he's got 20 litres, 17 minutes remaining, plus the lap that the countdown timer hit 0. So Andrex could be very tight on fuel here. May need to end up making one more stop. Where is Marauder in terms of Inky Chris? Oh, he's miles behind Inky Chris. You can see 1 minute and 10 seconds between the two Porsche 919 drivers. So yeah, even if Andrex does have to make a pit stop, he's not going to lose the second position, as Inky Chris is going to need to take on just that little bit more fuel than Andrex. There's only about 3-4 litres difference between the two, so it ain't much, but that'll be enough to keep Andrex in second, as Dow King is into the pit lane to serve his final pit stop, pitting from second place with 1.5 litres of fuel remaining. Empower goes through to retake second position. Mr. Van Orman has checked out at the head of the GTE field, has got quite a comfortable lead there. So now we just look to D'Couza, who is come out of the bus stop chicane, but Dow King is rolling down pit road with the fuel that he needs to get himself to the end of the race and coming out of the pit lane now. So Dow King will hold on to that final podium spot. So good recovery drive by him, but what a race it could have been for him if he didn't clip that wall on the entry to the bus stop chicane that caused damage halfway through the first stint, which meant that he had to make the pit stop to get that damage repaired, and obviously put him out of sync with everyone else in the GTE field, which is why we've just seen him pit, whereas everyone else would have pitted a while ago. See that front inside tyre under rotating a little bit there in the braking zone. Dow King locking the wheel slightly. Smolder's also into the pit lane, and he's got quite severe damage to his Aston Martin. No wonder he's into the pit lane. You can see that he's got plenty of fuel for the remainder of the session, but he had no front bonnet, no front bumper, no rear bumper, and no rear wing. So with that severe lack of downforce, he was obviously coming into the pit lane to get that damage repaired, which means that Back Gabrielson is up into 7th position in the GTE class. He's got Chloe right in front of him as well. Half a second between the two drivers. You can see them both there in the shot. Chloe driving the M6 GTE car. There you can see the lock up at the front right hand tyre of Gabrielson's Porsche. Jumping on board. You can see gap lurking in and around a second between the two. Inky Chris and Andrex fairly close together. Has Andrex made a mistake somewhere along the line? Well, he has there. On the outside of turn 1, he was very, very deep. That's allowed Inky Chris to close up even more, but Andrex, 15 litres of fuel. He's got cars sliding past him there. Is that Yamo? Yes, it is. It's Yamo. He's going to put a lap down, or put Andrex a lap down on the race leader. So Yamo's got a lap ahead, and yeah, now Andrex is under all kinds of threat from Inky Chris behind, and yeah, the red markers in the leaderboard on the left-hand side indicate that the drivers have penalty. If it's a light blue or light grey, bluey grey, then it means that they have no penalty. We can see that Andrex is coming right under threat from Inky Chris as Inky Chris slides past Andrex coming down the back straight. Inky Chris using a little bit more of the hybrid energy to make that move stick, but Andrex either going into fuel saving mode to try and make it to the end of the race, or he was saving up a little bit more of his hybrid energy in order to use it this time round coming out the exit of the speedway section here. Or maybe Andrex was letting him go past so he can get into the slipstream and try and save fuel that way, but he's slipping back from Inky Chris's Andrex. Just going to put him out of that slipstream and window. So Inky Chris is now up into second. He's starting to pull away from Andrex, but we know for certain that Inky Chris is going to need to make a pit stop. He's now got 9.5 litres of fuel with just under 12 minutes remaining, so he's not going to make it to the end. Colonel McCoy and Marauder now fairly close together, so Colonel McCoy on a charge, trying to make up the time from the damage that he incurred hitting the back of Logan. And he's now closing right up onto the back of Marauder coming through the bus stop chicane. We just saw a diffuser on the track there as well. That may have been Smolder's diffuser where he pitted earlier. Either that or Royalty, because Royalty is into the pit lane with 21 litres of fuel. Let's jump back to Colonel McCoy. As if he's looking to use the slipstream and close up onto the back of Marauder there in front of him. It isn't going to be close enough for the lunge into turn 1. So instead he's going to follow him through. Slight wiggle through the mid corner though. That's just hindered his exit a little bit, but he's dumping a whole bunch of KERS, or the hybrid energy shall I say, out the exit and through turn 2. It's allowed him to close up closer onto the back of the Porsche driver. You can see it there, the power difference in the hybrid energy between the two cars. The Corvette doing a good job of facilitating this battle to slide past in turn 4 without being hindered too much. Kind of probably did play it a little bit safe though, just to make sure. So did Marauder, jumping onto the brakes a little bit. Good run through turn 3 there by Colonel McCoy. Initially it looked like he was slightly wide upon the exit, but he managed to carry the speed through quite nicely using the hybrid now. That's going to allow him to close up onto the back of Marauder. Also getting that slipstream. Marauder going defensive to the inside before the bus stop chicane. There is a Ford GT that we see here in front of us. Oh! Huge contact between Colonel McCoy and that Ford GT. Colonel McCoy obviously wanted to try and consolidate the position, and in his desperation tried to make the lunge but completely misjudged the braking point. Slammed into the back of the Ford GT. That is going to be some serious damage to the front of his car and some serious damage to the back of that Ford GT driver. Who was it? It may have been Bo. It may have been Bo, who's had a pretty damaged car, for me anyway, throughout the entirety of this race. I don't know if his car was actually damaged. Speedy Go is missing a front bumper, but he's just going through the international horseshoe, so I believe it was Bo. Either that or it was Royalty, but I don't think it was. I'm leaning towards Bo, as Inky Chris has been into the pit lane to make his splash and dash. He's now got 18 and a half litres of fuel. Well, let's now jump down to 16. but that'll be enough fuel to see him to the end of the race. But with that, Colonel McCoy has lost the position to Lama as well, and he's really struggling to get the car slowed down and into the apex of turn 5. So with that mistake, in his desperation to try and get past the lap traffic before the bus stop chicane, he's incurred quite considerable damage. I'm sure he's just going to carry on and bear with it for the remainder of the race and hold on to whatever position he can rather than just giving it up completely by making the pit stop. But yeah, if he was just patient with that traffic, just followed him through and instead just set himself up for the exit, he may have still been able to have defended from the threat of Marauder immediately behind him and held on to that 4th position. But yeah, very, very costly mistake there for Colonel McCoy. And yeah, he is continuing on round with that damage. He's keeping within a second to Lama in front of him, so it's probably not too bad. Probably just more of a knock of confidence making that mistake. It's keeping Coxon a good 9.5 or 8.5 to 9 seconds behind. So at the moment, he should be able to hold on to 6th position unless Coxon can really turn up the power and close that gap down. Let's jump to Gabrielson, who's still there on the back of Chloe. Gap still lurking around about half a second to 0.6 of a second. So they've got a little bit of LMP1 company behind them. I think that might have been Lama and Colonel McCoy going through the shot there. Indeed it was. So let's see, Andrax, 7.2 litres of fuel remaining. I do not think that Andrax has the fuel to go to the end of the race unless he does doing some serious fuel saving. No, he definitely needs to make a pit stop. I'm almost certain that they're using over 2 litres of fuel per lap. With that, he'll only be able to make the 3-minute mark. So Andrax will be making a pit stop, but he's got 13-14 seconds to Inky Chris, but Inky Chris seems to be just about safe on fuel, so it could be very close between the two. Yarmo has definitely got the fuel to go to the end, and he's also got the lead as well to cover off any potential issue. 1 minute and 43.5 seconds to 2nd place Andrax. Marauder 41.5 to 42 seconds off the back of his teammate in front of him, but this is a pretty strong showing for the Porsches, considering the Audis were absolutely dominating the front of the field in qualifying, and in the first stint of the race there is an Audi there immediately behind him. Wonder if that is Yarmo. Yep. So that'll be putting a 2nd lap down onto Marauder if and when Marauder lets him through, but Yarmo will be in no rush to get past that. Instead will play it relatively safe. Andrax is still going around circulating at the moment with 5 litres of fuel. Surely he'll probably realise that he's got his fuel calculation wrong there. And won't make it to the end of the race with the current fuel load that he's got. And Inky Chris closing that gap down quite considerably. And interestingly, this could be Andrax trying to fuel save, potentially. Judging by his previous lap time, it was a 36.8, so there may have been a mistake, possibly a half spin somewhere along the line, that caused that lap time. Let's see what this time it does. 35.8, so it's only a second faster. So he may be trying to fuel save and trying to eke it out to the end of the race, but you're really, really going to struggle with that amount to actually get there, whereas Inky Chris is pressing on with the 9 litres of fuel remaining. Ooh, that's a spin in the background. Who was that? Wasn't Yame? Munko and McCoy. On Coxon. I think it was Cleanstein. Having a spin there on the inside of turn 1. Coming very, very close to the inside wall. So, yeah, he's continuing on his way. So M-Power is currently in second place in the GTE class. Mr. Van Orman running a very nice steady pace out the front. Though his previous lap time, 1:47.7, in comparison to M-Powers and Dowkings, who were in the low and mid 41s. So we lost a good chunk of time on that previous lap, but it's not because of fuel saving. Probably would have been because of a half spin or getting caught up with traffic somewhere along the line. So he comes across the line now. Yeah, there you go, back on the pace with a high 41, so must have been a mistake for Mr. Van Orman. As I say, M-Power in second place. 22.5 or so seconds off the back of M-Power, and he's got a 22-second gap to Dowking behind him. Just going through the bus stop chicane there. Roaring out away. Takuza, a further 17 seconds behind. But then he's got a 1 minute and 1 second gap to Bo behind. And here is Andrex coming into the pit lane now just to make this final splash and dash. He'll be pretty frustrated, having got his fuel calculation wrong and costing him second place. He should be safe for third. Where is Marauder? He's just coming through Speedway 3 and 4. I believe there's a lap difference between the two. Actually, I don't think there is. Andrex currently in the pit lane at the moment. Andrex has lost third position. And fourth position. And fifth position. Lama, Colonel McCoy and Marauder have all just gone through. I wonder what the hold up there was for Andrex. Either potentially repairing some damage that he may have accidentally forgotten to uncheck from his pit strategy, or potentially a tyre change. But this late in the race, with only literally minutes remaining, no doubt that he would have not been taking tyres. But that'll be really frustrating for Andrex there with that final stop, costing him second place completely. He's now down in 7th place. He's lost the position to Coxon as well. Coxon has gone through. It's just exited turn 3. So there's a 5-second difference between the two, but oh, what the points could have been for Andrex. Just a simple error in his fuel calculations, not taking enough fuel on in his third and final, or what should have been final stop. Really, really disappointing and frustrating for him. Lama is now there in 4th place and is half a second behind Marauder. So a battle for the final podium position is on as we're into the final 30 seconds of this race. Let's just double check real quick to see where Yamo is. So Yamo's just going into turn 1 now. So this is going to be the final lap of the race for these two. So this is going to be the battle to watch. Also Xeon and Speedy Go are within half a second or so of each other. But let's stick with this LMP1 field, or this LMP1 battle, as Lama is closing up onto Marauder, having to go around the outside coming into turn 3. Marauder's got that defensive inside line. Lama being forced to go the long way round, but he may get the switch back here, get the dump of KERS on the exit, and is able to use that hybrid energy to boost past Lama. Lama boosting past Marauder. Big lock up though coming into turn 5. But all Marauder is going to need to do now is just save a little bit of energy, try not to use too much coming off the exit here, try and stick with the slipstream, get a good run coming through the bus stop chicane, and then dump as much of that hybrid as he possibly can and use that slipstream to try and get past, coming through Speedway 3 and 4 and onto this start-finish straight. Let's jump up to Yamo as he's coming through the bus stop chicane now and coming out into Speedway 3 and 4. So this is exactly where Marauder needs to be. That is exactly what Lama doesn't need to be doing, because that's going to be a slowdown for him. So now it's just a battle of the hybrids Marauder will be dumping all the hybrid that he possibly has. So will Llama as well. But here comes Yama across the line to take the race win here with the season opener for round 5. Let's jump to Llama and Marauder as they come across the line. Barely anything between the two. And Marauder gets the position due to the penalties that Llama has. Conor McCoy recovers up into 4th position. But it was Yarmo coming away with the race win for the season opener of the season 5 of the Endurance League. Let's see where Mr. Van Orman is. He's coming through the bus stop chicane now. Ahead of the GTE field. He's got a comfortable gap of 23.5 seconds to Empower behind. So here he comes across the start-finish line. Mr. Van Orman taking the class win for the GTE field for the season opener. It'll be Empower coming across the line in 2nd place. A disappointment for Andretti coming home in 6th position. Cox on there in 7th. Cleanstein coming home in 8th. The last driver of the GT, the LMP1 field. Empower coming across the line as one of the last of the GTE fields, and that is going to be the conclusion to the race. So the win goes to Yarmo. No doubt he'll be ecstatic with that. Inky Chris gets 2nd place. Marauder in 3rd. Conor McCoy came home in 4th position. Llama in 5th. Andretti in 6th position. Coxon in 7th. And then Cleanstein rounding up the LMP1 field. For the GTE drivers, Mr. Van Orman taking the class win. Empower in 2nd place. Dalking in 3rd. Dakusa 4th. Bo coming home in 5th place. Back Giebelston in 6th place. Chloe in 7th. 8th place goes to Smolden. 9th. Bazanchek. Flaming Parrot in 10th. Speedy Go in 11th. Zion in 12th position there. And then Mali Bako in 13th. 14th goes to Royalty. And then Atlas Guerin comes home in 15th. And there you can see that Logan retired. And then Colin got DQ'd. Interestingly, that may have potentially been speeding in the pit lane. He's got a 55-second penalty there. There we can see. So quite a substantial penalty for him. But that is going to be the final results for this opening round of Season 5. We've got a couple of drivers in the commentary box waiting for interview, so we shall bring those guys in. So here we are, 2 GTE drivers. Mr. Van Orman taking the class win, and then Dalking coming home in 3rd place. Mr. Van Orman, we'll start with you. How was your race? Very eventful at the start, obviously being in very close proximity at the head of the GTE field, and then once things started to settle down, you seemed to kind of take the race into your own hands and take control of it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so obviously I expected that we were going to be in a train for a long time, but when we were in the train, I actually already felt that I had a pretty decent amount of pace in the pocket, you know. Obviously, nobody was driving for 100%, but I kind of felt, you know, everything felt perfect on the car. So, and then obviously the incident, I don't really exactly know what happened, but yeah, I guess it will be talked about later. But yeah, then from that point on, I think it was with Scott, and at some point Scott made a mistake, and you know I was trying to stay with Scott in a way that, you know, we would be the two-man train. But at some point, yeah, I think he made a mistake, and I thought, okay, now I'm going to just drive myself and see where I end up. So, yeah, a race without mistakes, no problems, no issues. So that's what wins races, I guess.
Yeah, definitely in these endurance races as well. Obviously, the length of the races, there's plenty of room to recover if there are mistakes that you had made, but you seem to have very much control of that. Obviously, the setup working out very, very nicely for you. How much time did you put into practicing for this opening round?
Yeah, actually, quite a couple of hours. Not like we do for a GT3 league, but I think 4 or 5 hours, I guess. So enough to make it right. That's for sure.
Excellent, good stuff. Well, congratulations for you getting the race win. We'll move on to Daryl King. Obviously, you had a very good and very competitive start, but what happened to you? Because you incurred some damage, potentially scraping the wall on the entry to the bus stop?
No, Empower rear-ended me. Give
Ah,
me a give me 100% damage to the rear, so I had to pit to get it fixed. And I was just losing after that. The rear of the car was still red, so obviously you're losing down the straight, even when it was fictional. But yeah, I still managed to pull it back to P3 or P2, whatever it's going to end up. So still a good drive, after having one more pit stop compared to everyone else having fixing damage.
I was going to say, obviously, you fell quite far back. I think you ended up 10th or 11th in class after
Yeah,
your pit
no,
stop.
I think
Obviously, phenomenal job getting
yeah.
yourself back through the field.
Yeah, and there were some hairy moments as well, like people spinning in front of me. But that's the part of endurance racing, That's why I love it so much.
Yep.
It definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat. And then 2 hours went so quick. Literally, before I knew it, it was like 20 minutes left. I was like, damn.
Yeah, it's quite
Yeah.
surprising. Well, especially when you're in the driver's seat. Not so much when you're in the commentary box. You do certainly notice the length of the races a lot more than you do when you're actually driving. But yeah, phenomenal job by you. Obviously, the epitome of don't give up. Obviously, keep going until the end of the race. And yeah, in the end, getting third position, coming across the line. So good stuff there as well. Are you feeling quite confident about the next race? Are you looking forward to it in two
Yeah,
weeks' time?
definitely. When we was in that train at the beginning, I thought it was just going to be an epic race. I think there was 4 or 5 of us who was all on pace. And it don't matter, even if you're about 3 or 4 tenths off here, because of the slipstream, you're never going to get dropped off.
Yeah.
So after that, broke the train up. It was a bit gutting. Because everyone was being quite cautious and trying to save tires and fuel. It was being like a bit of like a chess match at the beginning. So, but yeah, I'm feeling confident. Hopefully, to go to the next round, no incidents, and be there at the end for the win. Hopefully.
Excellent. Very cool stuff. Well, good luck to both of you for the next race. I'm sure Mr. Van Allen will be looking to try and continue the strong form that he's had here, and obviously you'll be looking to try and redeem yourself a little bit and get a slightly better result. Even though third position, to be fair, is a pretty good result for the season opener. But yes, that is pretty much going to be it for the coverage of round one of season 5 for the AOR Endurance League. Thank you very much for everybody who interacted in the live stream, who have tuned in, have been chatting throughout the entire duration of it. I noticed a couple of drivers there, or not necessarily drivers, sorry, but a couple of viewers there being out from the lights to flag. So very good stuff by you guys. Obviously, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future AOR live streams. We shall be back in 2 weeks' time on the 16th of May at the same time, 7:30 p.m. UK time for coverage of round 2 at the Red Bull Ring GP circuit. But from myself, thanks very much. Hopefully, we'll catch you in the next one. Until then, have fun, stay safe, and take care.